Started talking. So good to see you. Wonderful week. Man, I have been busy putting out videos. If you guys have been watching, they've been like one right after the other. And travel time is serious amount of time with I get a serious amount of products in for you guys to see, new things coming out in the market and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do the same as I always do, or as I've recently started doing anyway. We're going to see if we can cover some of the news going on in the industry, and then we're going to get into the live stream this week, which is talking all about solar automation with Solar Assistant and Home Assistant. And I added some Venus stuff for people, those Victron folks that want to look at a little bit of a Servo GX option. That isn't quite the Servo GX itself, but it works the same way as a Servo GX. So for those of you that are interested in that, it'll also help you get the automation there. So, and we'll go into how my system's configured and what is set up there in that particular thing, in that particular arena, what I'm using all of this stuff for. And as of, just kind of give you a heads up, this is not a pre-designed demo where I'm showing you a whole bunch of fluff and recorded videos. This is live, and I am at a remote location. So if there are some glitches and some real problems with it, you'll know that it is truly a real thing. If there are none, then I'm a miracle worker, and we'll call it at that, which we know that ain't going to be the case. There's always problems. I want to kind of get into some of the news going on and give everybody a heads up that do not forget that the solar tax credit of 30% is scheduled to end on December 31st for individuals. That means that if you've got a system planned, make sure that you're using the, I've got a QR code here that I can send to you. And let me see if I can turn this on. There we go. So I got a QR code for you. This link, all of the content from today will all be connected to that link there, and any content or links that I have during the show I'll add to that. But I've gone ahead and added a whole bunch of pre-existing links to it, and one of them is a couple of links to some affiliates for Signature Solar and Santan Solar. If you're interested in used panels and stuff, they've got an awesome assortment of them. So but the fact, just a reminder that December 31st for individuals to get that that 30% tax credit. Now keep in mind, this isn't a reduction in your earnings. This is an actual tax credit, meaning if you paid in, let's say $10,000 worth of taxes, and you get a tax credit of 15 grand, that means that, and I mean, if 30% of it is 15 grand, that means that you will get $15,000 off of your taxes, and it is carry-overable. So that means you'll get all of that 10 grand back this year and another 5 grand, which will carry over till next year. So make sure that if you're working on those systems that you get in there. Also, in some of the news later, there's a real important item. I'll highlight it when I get there. I don't want to jump the gun because I got some other subject matter that needs to take place first before it makes a total sense. But I'll get into that and tell you, but there's a very important reason to make haste when we're talking about getting these orders into these companies. Also, a little bit in the news is good news for all of my Texas people. If you are in Texas, it is a State Bill 1202, looks like it has passed, which is basically them saying that they are going to allow third-party companies to do the solar and battery plan reviews and inspections, meaning you are no longer dependent upon the state to do them and for them to take their sweet old time and delay things for years and years or months and months. And to be honest with you, I don't live in Texas anymore. I'm in Florida. So I don't know what some of those delays are, but I know how efficient the government is. And that would mean that they're probably waiting for them. So on that bill, that company has the, let's see if I can get this right. The companies that are doing the inspection have 15 days to do the inspection and to give the report to the government. And the government has 2 days to issue the permit for those. that is fantastic news for you guys. Congratulations. That will speed things up a tremendous amount, I'm imagining. There are quite a bit of sources on this one too. This wasn't just rumored. This is an actual State Bill 1202. And if you look in the resources on the home automation links here, you will find PC Magazine had a link to it, Environmental Texas had a link to it, and Good Faith Energy also had a link to it and some details about it. And all three of those links are at the bottom of those of that QR code. They are also in the description. If you are not watching on a TV and don't want to scan it with your phone or whatnot, you can get to those same links in the description down below. So also some good news or actually some bad news for Nevada. Nevada net metering and demand charges. So it looks like here they have approved a new daily demand charge based on peak 15-minute window. And what it basically comes down to is they're sick and tired of us solar people making a dent in their bills and getting nothing that they can bill. It looks like it's going to be rooftop solar customers will probably end up getting about a $20 increase in their bill. I know very little about this one. It was in the Reno Gazette Journal and in the Las Vegas Review Journal. So if you have access to one of those two, there are links down below or on the QR code for those also. But the feedback that I got on it looks like it'll probably be about a $20 increase for you. And I don't know if that means that it's a $20 increase regardless if you use it or not, or how it works. But in my impression of it is if it's peak demand and you are a solar customer, then that would mean you probably want to slowly charge as opposed to do, a supercharge at any time. Although that may be where you're getting away with some of the net zeroing at the low off hours and cramming it in the battery as fast as possible. So unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about some of these regulation changes like that except just keep going until someday when we're completely off grid and don't need them at all. A couple of other pieces of news. Tesla Powerwall milestone. They claim to have deployed over 1 million Powerwall batteries worldwide. Now, this one, when I heard the number, I had a little suspicion that I didn't believe it totally, and I went to ChatGPT actually and said, can you validate and verify this for me? The numbers are based on the manufacturing numbers and based on ship numbers. It does not mean that they went into production or went into use on all millions. So, but give or take, a few for defectives and that type of thing, the number is real. The plant has manufactured over 1 million devices. So that's pretty impressive. Unfortunately, there are no links or anything for this one. There was just some Tesla's Energy blog had listed this one and talked about it a little bit. And I don't have a link for it, unfortunately, sorry. Got some other cool news and a little shaping of the industry from Enphase product news. The Enphase product news is they pre-orders for IQ9 commercial microinverters. Now, this one, this was announced at RE+, and I didn't hear a whole lot about it when it happened, but now I understand the significance of this is that they are pushing into the commercial area, which is really good. I'd taken a trip to Connecticut back a few weeks ago. Most of you were familiar with all the RV reports I did. But the one thing I noticed was going on, and I've started to see more and more of, is that business is getting into it. So they are bringing their microinverter from a large company that had been, in the smaller industries was ruled more by the smaller companies, and they're bringing it into that. So that merging of that technology is an interesting development. So, and then this is the piece of news that's really important that relates back to the first piece on the federal tax credit and the 30%. So there are a lot of reports out there, Wood and SEIA reports and all of that are all starting to report that the forecast has been trimmed due to the federal trade tariffs policies and expected volatility in pricing will lead to slower ship times and possibly shortages because the production may be ramped down in some of these cases. So it's very important that if you are planning to do something by the end of the year, where this could impact you is that you go to order what you want and then they don't, a week later they find out they don't have it if the product availability isn't immediately known or they run into some problems. So if you're looking at doing something, I still encourage you to take that step and make that happen as soon as possible so that you have time for any changes that you might need to make in that plan or things that you might want to have to alter due to the fact that that particular battery bank isn't available or that rack isn't available and you got to switch rack, which means you got to switch banks, or the inverter's not available, whatever the case may be. It comes down to just be aware that there's some volatility there and they're anticipating some supply chain problems and some information differences and stuff there. So it could cause your plan, at least if you're thinking about a last minute plan to order a system and get it installed and have it up and running by the end of the year and take that 30% tax credit. If there's a simple 2-week shipping slowdown for something that you've ordered, how will that impact you? So please be aware of it. And that's really all the news I had for this week. It was after RE last week. There was a ton of news last week and that was cool stuff. But this week, I wanted to get into I've got a really cool agenda planned, and I tried to plan it out a little bit to give it a little bit of structure as opposed to some of my normal live streams where I just kind of shoot from the hip. But I will encourage all of you, if you do have questions, that you do put them in the chat and I will handle them also. I have collected 3 or 4 or 5 questions on each of the different categories that I've got of different things here. And we're talking about it, I'll go through an intro and explain the system to you. Then I'm going to go into Solar Assistant and the basics of it. Then I'm going to go into Home Assistant. I added Victron Venus OS to it so that we could get a complete picture of the entire system. Then I want to do something, go through a section about how we connect them together, some dashboards, and show you how to control things and how my dashboards work. And that will be a live demo, and many pieces of this along the way will be a live demo. And then we'll do some real world use cases. I'll explain to you some things that I've seen them used for. And then we'll talk about some configuration tips and common problems that I ran into that could help you out there. And then if there are some, we'll do some more, more demo and play around a little bit, and things that I felt got missed as I went through this. No matter how many times I go through a plan like this, I always feel like at the end, there's one more thing I need to explain to make it, complete. So feel free, if you think I've missed something, just call me out on it. Just say something in the chat and I'll be glad to take it up. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get this show kicked off and start off with basically the quick system overview of my system, what I have, and the ideal use case in my mind at this point. Maybe not ideal use case, but the use case that I am using and that I represent for that. I may take some time and draw this out on the whiteboard so that we have that to reference back to later on, but we'll see if that's necessary. So basically in my system, I have, if you're not aware of this, I have a RV, and in my RV, I have a split phased breaker box, which basically means I have 2 legs of 120 volts, 240 volts, but it runs in 2 separate legs. There is no 240 volt devices on the system, but it does run 2 legs from a 240 volt system, giving me 2 50 amp breakers to run, which is 100 amps of 120 volts, which is quite a bit of power for an RV. The inverter that I chose was the 6000 XP. There is a video for the 6000 XP out there, and you can go and take a look at that. There is a complete series of videos, and in the replay, I'll see if I can link up in the corner, one of these corners around here, I'll link it up and see if I can send you to the playlist. And as a matter of fact, I'll add it to the playlist also, the playlist for the RV system. And I'm just going to write that down so later on when I get home, I don't say, what was that I promised I was going to add to the playlist? But that is definitely in my history, and if you go look at my playlist, you can find that. So that 6000 XP is fed by 31 kilowatt hours of battery storage. I have 3 EG4 Life Power 4 batteries, and I've got 1 DIY battery that is another 304 amp hours. So total it's 604 amp hours of 48 volt system with a 6000 XP inverter. And the 6000 XP is basically 220 volt legs supplying 300 watts per leg. So it doesn't supply the whole 50 amps that it would get if I plugged it into the pedestal, but I took all of the air conditioning units off of the RV, the battery, not the battery sucking, well, they would have been battery sucking. I took all of the energy hungry systems off of the RV, and I installed good, clean mini splits in there. So I have 2 mini splits, one in the master bedroom and one in the master cabin of the RV. Now this is a 5th wheel, so I have a main cabin with a kitchen and a living room, a bunkhouse in the middle, and another air conditioner in the master bedroom. So that was basically kind of the system. In this system, I also have a backup charging system from Victron. And this Victron system is a 48 volt charger. It's the Victron Smart Charger 150/35, which means 150 volts, 35 amps. It normally gets power when I'm traveling from portable panels or solar panels that I bring with me. Sometimes I don't need to bring them with me, but when I do need them. When I'm at home, I use the solar shed as the feed for those panels, or I did up until recently when I started switching the solar shed around where it has its own set of batteries and everything. But when I'm traveling, that would be where that energy is fed from. So that said, this is basically the system that I'm doing. Now for me, I have the RV, and so I like having some of the home automation things where I can turn lights on and turn lights off, and that's really why I was interested in the home assistant type stuff. The solar assistant was basically where I started getting into automation for the solar for my solar system, and that's what combined the two. And we'll go through in detail pieces of those two as we break this down. But we're going to start off with the solar assistant basics and how the solar assistant is kind of connected to the system and what you need to do it. So what solar assistant does, and let me kind of give you a real-time view of what solar assistant does. Let me see if I can get my screen here set up so we can let's see. There we go. All right, so this is the solar assistant, and if you're interested in a link to solar assistant, I'm going to put the QR code on the screen here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to take it off so that you can actually see what I'm doing. But in this QR code, you'll find links to everything during this program, but specifically you will find a link to solar assistant. They have a variety of different variations of it that come with hardware, or just order the software and you can put it on your own thing. I run it on a Raspberry Pi 3. I think it's called Orange, Raspberry Pi Orange, or is it not Raspberry Pi, it's Orange Pi. But I ordered it directly from them, and it was about $250, but I think the software is only about $50. So it's really not that super expensive. What the solar assistant allows you to do is pull from real-time pull figures and statistics and stuff directly out of your inverter. It connects to your inverter like it was any other system. So if you go to Solar Assistant, I'm just going to go to their website here and look at what they have available. They have multiple devices here that you can buy, the software only, as we just talked about, and multiple parts here. But the compatibility list is what we're really looking for. And let's just see if I can find a solar assistant inverter compatibility. There it is down there. And let's just take this. That's the perfect page, I think. So as you can see here, there are a few that are not supported if you're looking at their list here. But there is a tremendous amount of inverters that are supported, and they have a wide variety of different brands and different things, as you can see down here on the list. And they've got a wide range of batteries also. I run my batteries through my solar assistant, don't even run them into my inverter in closed loop. So you can see here from EG4 to daily BMS to CAN bus to JK BMS. There's all kinds of BMSs and batteries that are supported, but there's also the EG4, the Dre, the Insun, the GrowWatt, the Lux Power, the Mus, the Power Mister, the Sun, the SoArc, the SRNE. This is just a huge amount of them. Now, with Solar Assistant, you get a CAN set of reports once it's connected. And it's very easy to connect. You set the system up, you go into the configuration, you come over here to the model that you want to connect to. And I'm going to disconnect mine so that you can see us connected. And you come in here and you pick the model that you want. In my case, it's a Lux Power because the 6000 XP is made by Lux Power. You pick which connection it is. If you have multiple inverters out there, you'll see all of them listed here. You pick the one that it is, and then if in my case I have batteries connected also, so I'm able to pick which brand of batteries and what kind of connection we have to them. These are EG4 batteries, so they run the Nevada protocol, and so I collect that, and then you hit connect, and basically this goes in, connects directly to the inverter, as you can see here, scans the batteries, detects how many of them there are, and then all the statistics basically become available in the system. Now, the ups and the downside to Solar Assistant, and if this is what all you need is these reports here in their native form and unedited and unchanged. Unfortunately, Solar Assistant isn't super configurable. It is a what you see, what you get, very, very simple. What we just did is basically the extent of configuring them than when you first set things up. When you first set things up, you do have to go in and configure the Wi-Fi and that stuff. But you saw that listed here also in this configuration. It's listed right here. And you go in, I've got both an Ethernet connection and a broadband connection set up for this to allow for a backup if one is to go down. And I see it sometimes happening. If my Ethernet port goes out or my router goes out, then automatically it switches over to Wi-Fi and connects that way. But you can do that. And so that's what I've done here. And once you configure those two items, all the reports, all the history and everything is pre-configured with Solar Assistant. And it basically goes through and takes care of everything that you see here. All the reports from what inverter is connected, what mode it's in, what is the PV power, what are the batteries connections here, and anything that it can derive from your inverter also will come through. So if I had the batteries connected to the inverter directly, they would come through here also. Now the only reason I don't do it that way is because I also have a DIY battery. And I'll show you later when we get into Home Assistant how I take the information from both of those systems and bring them together in a single location. And the tricky part there is the behind the scenes, how they connect. And that's what I really want to show you. I want to show you how they work up front, and then we'll get to a little bit more detailed information about how they connect after you understand that. So from here, you can see that the grid is connected. You can see that the batteries, what is the charge of the batteries that I have. And if you've got the batteries, either the newer batteries or you have them directly connected, you can see stats on each one of them. And then after that, you've got the total load is 1.5 kilowatts right now. And then the solar power coming in is 1.86. So I'm actually generating a little excess battery power, and that is being sent over to the battery. And you can see the batteries are at 71%. It gives you battery history. Like here, it talks about battery power, and you can see once the sun came up where it was actually charging. And then down here, you can see the state of charge of my batteries as it goes down overnight. And then in the morning, it starts coming back up, and then it comes back down in the night, and it goes up and down. Now, there are some additional charts over here that you can get to, but keep in mind that all of these charts are stock charts. And I say stock like it's an automobile, but they all come with it. They're all canned reports right out of the box. You don't have to configure anything. You don't have to set anything up. You basically point to your internet, point to your inverter, and tell it to go. And in this case, in my case, the Wi-Fi connection was just point to my inverter on the Wi-Fi connection because I'd already configured my Wi-Fi, my internet there, and voila, it was done. It was pretty simple and easy. It does keep a totals page, so the charts, I'm sorry, let me go through the charts real quick for you. It's basically an overview of the different loads versus PV power, and you can see during the day we have much more PV power than we have loads. And you can see here I did have the grid click on for an hour or two earlier today and subsidize the incoming power so that the batteries could be charged by the PV power. And the reason I do it that way is that in order to take PV power and put it into the batteries, it's DC going to DC, it's very efficient. In order to take grid power and feed all of my systems in my RV, it's very efficient. But if I take the PV power and convert that to AC power, then I have to pay the tax on the loss of converting that power back and forth. And then later on the evening, when I need to do a charge, I have to take the AC power, convert that to DC power, and put it in the battery, and there's a tax and a loss there too. So what I like to do, instead of paying that tax and doing it that way, is I just tell the, I go in here through Solar Assistant, and I go over here and I say, okay, well, from this time to this time, I want you to run off the grid first. And it allows the system to do what it did here, where it just runs everything I have off of the grid, and then all the PV power goes directly into the batteries, and I don't have to pay a tax on either one of it. I don't have to pay a tax to get it out of the battery, convert it to AC, and I don't have to pay a tax later to take the AC and charge the batteries. And you can see here what a dramatic difference it made in charging during that time. And you can see here in the state of charge, the dramatic increase in charging there. During this time of the year, I've learned that I'm probably about 8 to 10 kilowatt hours of power a day, or 8 to 10 kilowatt hours of energy a day short of having enough to supply my system completely off grid. But you can't really see that from the reports here, other than coming over to some of the summary reports under total under Solar Assistant. And you can see here, I have a load of about 20 kilowatt hours, and I have solar of about 18.5. The battery was charged 6.31, and I discharged 4.4. I had about 4.6 kilowatts of grid use. And you can see that yesterday I had absolutely no grid use. I had good sun. It was relatively cool, and I didn't need to have any. But lately, about this time of the day, I've been using between 5 and 10 kilowatts a day on average. And you can see that that's between 5 and actually, so that's battery charged. I'm sorry, grid use is over here. I try to stay under 10 kilowatt hours a day, and that leaves me with under the minimum usage that I get from the electric company. I end up with no electric bill there. I don't particularly like it having any power, but I am in Florida, and at this point here in Florida, the temperature is hot all day, it's hot all night, and the sun is beating down directly on everything all day long, so there is no hiding from it. And I'm in an RV. We're not talking about the best insulation of a house or something like that where you get a little bit more efficiency. Now, I did get rid of those air conditioners that came with the RV and put mini splits in. That helps tremendously. As you can see here, the load is between 20 and looks like 27 is the highest here during September. But this was in the 55s and 60s before I replaced those air conditioners. So it made a huge impact on making sure that worked the way it's supposed to. Okay, so the report's here, and then it has a 12-month variation month by month, and it shows you that on a chart. And then if you go over to the power window, this gives you a little bit of configuration where you can set up a grid charge schedule or a grid first schedule, which was what I was talking about earlier. There's also some automation here, and I've played a little bit with the automation here. It's very simplistic, but it does effectively work. And then the configuration screen. That's it for Solar Assistant. If you're looking for something simple to get nice looking statistics, and they've got a dark screen mode now, they only recently added, but if you're looking for something that gives you nice little statistics that work great on your phone, that work great on your on a computer or whatnot, they've also got a service that you'll see here up at the top where you can configure this to work through their website, which means you can access it anywhere in the world. Does that mean that you can't directly go to an IP address and log into it with a firewall in your gate? Yes, you can. I tested that. It does work. You have to understand how to configure the firewall, how to get it through the gate. When your IP changes, it no longer works, and that kind of stuff. If you do it this way, it spoofs all that for you, and everything just always works as like we're logged in here. They basically give you a domain off of theirs like they did me, and you can log in from anywhere and it stays connected to it and keeps up with all of that stuff and make sure that you don't have any of those problems. And it seems to be a bit more secure that way. So that's Solar Assistant. And so going on from Solar Assistant, let's take a look at Home Assistant. And I am going to switch over to this screen while I do that and put this QR code up on the screen. If you're interested in the links for any of this, it'll be in there, and I'm going to find the Home Assistant page. Sorry, I'm used to doing the Home Assistant from home, and I use the direct link, the local link. So when I go into a browser here and I type in Home Assistant, you can see it pulls up the local link for my local network, and then I have to figure out again how to connect to it from remote. There is an app on your phone that you can use. All of this is available, again, just like Solar Assistant. You can get to it from anywhere. They have a service. I think it's about $40 a year that not only does it donate to the company, to the open source world that builds Home Assistant, but it also allows you to have remote access from anywhere in the world that you have internet access, which is kind of nice. Now, that does mean that if you're on an RV like I do, you have to have internet access for that to work. If you're going from park to park and using park internet access, then that will work some of the times. I have a Starlink, so I don't have that problem. I'm constantly connected, so it's not really been an issue for me. But I do want to mention it just in case it's something that you're interested in. Okay, so Home Assistant is basically a home automation tool that allows you full ability to configure and to control items within your house. It just so happens that it also allows you to link in all of the solar information together. So I'm able to go out and say, hey, look, I have Solar Assistant, or I have this inverter, or I have that inverter. I want you to connect to it and pull all this information in. And then the only downside to Home Assistant is that it requires you to configure and build your screens. So all of the screens that you see here are, and I have 4, 5, or 6 of them, but those are my transitions through time of different things that I've needed. So at one point, I needed to know what was going on with my batteries, so I built this battery screen here. And it basically says, this is the total amperage coming in PV, this is the total amperage that's being used right now, this is what's being put into the battery, here's the consumption rate versus what's actually stored. So I'm consuming 78% of all of the energy that I'm producing right now, but that means that the remaining 22% is going into the battery. You can see here that I've got the 4 batteries that we spoke of earlier, and what amperage is going into each of those batteries and thus being charged. It also gives me things like the battery voltage and the battery state of charge. And then, but the key here is with Home Assistant is it's not limited to just what we saw over in Solar Assistant. I've got the data from Solar Assistant coming in from one platform. I've got all of my home automation devices. So for example, if I wanted to turn off the air conditioning in my living room, as you can see here, I can adjust the temperature of my air conditioning. I can shut my air conditioner off. I can also go in, and you'll see out there I have some switches on the right-hand side. I've got some fans in my bay, which is where my solar system is mounted, so I can turn those on and turn those off based on the temperature in the bay. And you can see the devices that I've got up at the top across the living room or the bedroom. And if I go over to the original screen we were on, you'll notice there's a couple of different temperature gauges here, which tell me what the temperature in the bay is, what the temperature in the living room is, what the temperature in the bedroom is, which will allow me to do things like if I'm out of town and the RV gets over, let's say, 90 degrees, I don't want to cause damage to the wood or the humidity or anything. It can automatically turn on an air conditioner for me and cool it off or drop the humidity based on how charged are my batteries and do I have enough batteries to do that. And if I have excess battery energy, I can have it leave it on more or less. In this case, the ones that we're looking at here, the bay power, the bay fans is controlled by basically by a configuration that I set up that says if the bay goes over a certain temperature, or if I have grid power coming in, or other various things, the inverter says that its temperature is of a certain way too hot or something along those lines. If I see any of those signs of things that could cause equipment trouble, then it turns on the fan, which basically pulls in cool air from underneath the RV and blows it out the vent at the very top, and it's forced through with some air to bring fresh air in there. It also allows me, which I didn't learn was really important until this year, but it also allows me to control things like humidity. When I see the humidity going up in the dawn of a spring or fall, it allowed me to stop those vents and let the heat from the inverter burn off some of that humidity, because high humidity in the high 90 percentiles can cause equipment problems for computers and inverters and stuff like that. So it allowed me to say, hey, look, the humidity is getting up into 90%, but if I let the heat from the generated from the inverter bring burn that heat, that moisture out, then I can bring that down before it gets to a critical level, and it has to shut the system down. So Home Assistant has, and you can see there's another screen here, but it has a tremendous amount of configuration screens and inputs. Now, let me go into and show you, there's tons of status screens here that I can walk you through. I mean, here I've got one that just talks about all the different PV, the strings I have, and how much wattage is coming in from each of those strings. And then I've got another one here, which is a power flow, which shows what's coming in from solar and total today that's coming in. Keeping in mind, this is what's coming in from the solar assistant and what's coming in from the solar shed from the Victron side of things. And then I have another one here, which on this report that shows all the total usage of the RV and AC usage. And then a second one that's all the DC usage. In other words, in an RV, you have 12-volt lights, you have all kinds of different water pumps and things that all run off of your 12 volts. Some people have refrigerators and all that run off of 12 volt. So this would actually be where that power consumption comes from. And then it has total wattage being used currently, and then it allows me to break down certain devices. So if I go into, let's say for example, if I go over here to the master status screen, I've got a power usage screen. So at one point I was tracking all the different devices in my RV and making sure that I understand which ones were using what power. In a house, this would be very useful to track how much your pool pump is using, how much your attic fan is using, how much your hot water heater is using, and things like that. You would want to know all these items. I have a hot water heater one here, and you can see that the hot water heater in my RV is used 2.4 kilowatt hours of energy today. Now, if I was traveling and not using that hot water, then I would turn that off and that energy I wouldn't want to have that on. So I could build in switches for all of that, as we saw over here in this screen here, where I have lights and bedroom plugs that turns fans on, and I've got a lot of lights out in my shed and bench lights and stuff, so that if I forget them are on, I've got an automation that just runs at a certain time of night and shuts all the lights off for me, so I don't even have to worry about it, whether I do it or not. So there are tons of different screens here, but the significant difference between what you see here with Home Assistant and what you see here with the Solar Assistant is Solar Assistant is a pre-configured, pre-packaged product that allows very little flexibility of building onto what you have. What you see is pretty much what you get. If you go out and look through it on the internet, you'll see almost this identical screen for everyone out there, and it's pretty easily identified because there is no configuration that you can do to change it other than light and dark themed screens. I'm running in dark theme now, but for years, until 2-3 weeks ago, there was no dark theme for it. They just recently came out with this. So going back to Home Assistant, it allows you to control all that. Now, it's not limited to what I have here. I can control the hot water heaters coming on and going off at certain times of day. I can control lights on the porch coming off and on. I've got a set of lights in the living room that 15 minutes before sunset, they automatically come on so that when I'm sitting there at night and I'm reading or something, I don't have to remember, oh, go get on, I don't have to wait until it gets so dark that I can't see. They just come on for me. They also, if I fail to turn them off when I go to bed, at midnight, they just shuts off all the lights that it knows I don't need. That's all programmable by me through a set of rules that you set up with Solar Assistant or with Home Assistant. So here you've got automations and stuff, and you can say things like, I can get a griddage out alert where it basically says when the Lux Power grid voltage drops below 210 volts, then I want you to send a notification. And if I look at the notification, it's basically sending it to my phone saying that there's a grid outage. So even when I'm out of town or when I'm not around, I can see when I have outages. Now, I can also build triggers to do things. I can tell it to go shut off the hot water heater. I can tell it to, if I've got no grid, I may want to do some things that I normally wouldn't want to do if I had grid power as a backup. Now, in my case, I like to operate 24/7 off grid, and there's some statistics here that you can see on that, and I'm glad to share them with you. This shows you one day, but if I go in here and say, show me this month, you can see this month I'm 71% self-sufficient. So I use the grid quite frequently during this month. Now, if we go back to August, you'll see here I was 76% also in that month. In July, I was 79%. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Time of year makes a huge difference because of heat where I am. But you go back another month, I was 91% efficient. You go back to May, and I didn't even have the grid hooked up. I didn't have the grid hooked up in the month before that in April, and I didn't have the grid hooked up in the month before that. Actually, I did have it here, but it's so little that it's showing zero. It was 2.9 kilowatt hours way down here, and that was actually a software upgrade where I didn't realize that when I told the 6000 XP to do the upgrade that it was going to switch into bypass mode, and it switched into bypass mode and used the grid for a few minutes while it did the upgrade. Now I get into the early part of the year, and you'll see here in February I used it a little bit, and then in January I used it considerably right here around January 1st or January 21st. Now, the significant part of this in January 21st is that is when I installed the DIY battery. So you can see before I had the DIY battery in December, I was 85% efficient, and before that I was 74% efficient. Now, unfortunately, this little glitch here is when you reset a device. When you reset a device, the totals that come along with it get reset, and it kind of throws a little skew in your statistics. In October, I had a little bit of that too. And then in September last year is when I installed this system and got it hooked up to Home Assistant. So you can see there I was at 82%. So for the most part, I run around 80% off grid completely. During the spring and fall months, when the air conditioner's not running as much, I'm completely off grid. Now, this is Home Assistant where everything has been brought together. Now, the trick here is, and the question I always get is, how are these items brought together? So there is one more piece of the puzzle here that I need to show you before I get into showing you how to do that. I'm going to put the QR code up if you're interested in the links to any of these products while I look this up. I'm going to go to the VRM from Victron, which Victron has its own software, as most manufacturers do. Most manufacturers have a piece of software, for example, the EG4 software. Wow, EG4 monitor. See if I can get logged into this real quick. And I'll go back and let you see. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to this, and I'm going to get rid of that QR code for a few minutes. So this is the EG4 software. The problem that I have with the EG4 software, and most of these softwares, is that, and you can access this one on their website, you can access this one on your telephone, and your phone looks very similar to this. It's just a stripped down version. But the problem that I have with it is the data that you get with it is very simplistic. You don't have control to really automate a whole lot and configure a whole lot. So what I did, but what's important is the data from this system can be extracted through Solar Assistant, and from Solar Assistant, it can be put into Home Assistant from Solar Assistant. But the problem is I also have, if you remember, I also have Victron devices that are Victron charge controller that I run the solar shed off of, and that I run some other, my smart shunt and other things off of. So I wanted to know when my Home Assistant is running, I don't want to know what my EG4 battery's charge is. I don't want to know what my DIY battery's charge is. I want to know what the whole bank's battery charge is. So if you look at my battery review here, you'll notice that I have a Victron battery state of charge at 69.2. And you'll notice down here, I've got a Matt's RV battery one, the JK BMS, which is the DIY, and it's at 66.6%. And if I come down a little bit further, I've got a Lux Power state of charge, which is basically my EG4 batteries, which all three independently are listed here. And I have a state of charge for all of them. But what was important to me is I didn't want this combination of different states of charge. I wanted it all together in one place. And that was what the shunt gave me, the Victron shunt. But I want to be able to say, do I have a large imbalance? Do I have everything out of whack? And be able to control it a little bit more. That's where the Home Assistant was really good about bringing that stuff together. But I had to be able to bring the stuff from Victron into that. So that is where I got to the Venus, the Venus system, and I have two of them configured now. Right now is my main gateway in the RV, and the second one is how do I do that? Oh, dashboard. Let's try it that way. And we don't want the why can't I? Oh. You can see how often I'm in here, huh? Matt's RV. Here you go. So this is the Venus system in the RV. And so it has two devices connected to it. Over here, it has the smart shunt. And over here, it has the charger, which is the extra solar panels that aren't being used in the solar panel right now for the 12-volt solar shed workup that we did. But I needed to get this information into this Home Assistant. And so all of that data is brought together through a server called an MQTT. And it's basically a messaging agent. And so what it allows each of these to do is that the Solar Assistant, and if you go into the Solar Assistant and you look under configuration, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll notice here there's an MQTT broker, which basically is a server that the Solar Assistant provides that allows you to get to all of the data in their system in message form. In other words, when the state of charge changes, it sends a message. When the wattage of the solar panels change, it sends a message. So everything has a message. So you're talking about hundreds of messages every second coming through this to allow you to monitor everything connected to Solar Assistant. At the same time, I have everything coming from a Victron device over here in the Venus system that does exactly the same thing. It allows you to send all of this data to an MQTT server. Now, the problem is that both of them provide servers. And what I needed was a way to bring all these servers / brokers together into a single location to where the Home Assistant could read them all. So what I had to do is pull information from the inverter into Solar Assistant, pull the information out of Solar Assistant into the MQTT, take that and feed that into Home Assistant, take the Venus OS system and feed that into an MQ server, and take that and feed that into Home Assistant, and then Home Assistant also connects to switches and light switches and automation devices and Shelly devices and all kinds of different little connectors and stuff. And you can go into the device list in a Home Assistant. And if I look under the devices and service, you'll see here, there's all kinds of different connections to radios, to power supplies, to like Shelly devices here where I have the light switches and wall fans, and some of these are just meters to determine how much power there is. Some of these are actually on-off switches that you can control. Some of these are 120 volt switches like it would be to turn off a lamp in the, if you look at the switches over here for the shed light, turning it off or on as I just turned it on and I just turned it off, that would be a 120 volt light switch that it just basically is flipping for me. Whereas if you look at the bedroom fan switch, at night when we go to sleep, we always have a fan on. Well, the fan is just plugged into a wall switch, and I can automatically turn it on here, and then it can automatically be shut off in the morning so that I don't have to worry about going and hunting down how to get that thing turned on. There's also lamps in the living room and stuff that come on automatically. The outside lights on my porch, they come on at 5 minutes till sunset, and they get shut off at 11 o'clock at night every night. That way, regardless if I'm there or not, when I come home, there's always a porch light on and it's never turned off. But all of these devices are all brought together with Home Assistant through either directly connecting to the devices or connecting through an MQTT server. Now, it doesn't end there because a majority of the devices, clicked on the wrong button there, a majority of the devices you might have are some Shelly devices, but there's also the MQTT servers that we got. There's also Hub Space, which are these devices are basically the little light switch plates that you get at Home Depot. There's also radios and thermostats. The Tulia is my air conditioners. There's all kinds of Zigbee devices to control things like the refrigerator and the RV door, sensors to where if I leave the refrigerator on, funny thing is the refrigerator has a little tone that goes tee, 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 or at least I'm told it does. It's out of my audible zone. I don't hear it. So I actually had to install a kitchen Zigbee sensor on the door that would tell me when the door is left open, and it actually a message pops up on my phone to tell me that I've left it open. But it's also good to know when you're not in the house and stuff like that. I can look at the door and I can say, okay, when was the last time someone went in or out of the door? So I can go over to this now and just say, okay, look, the door was closed 2 hours ago, but it hasn't been open since then. So this was about the time I left to come here for broadcasting today. So basically what this tells me is that my wife hasn't left the house. But these type of things are what you can trigger on, and you can build in your automation around what is going on in your inverter, what is going on in your your home automation with your lights, and your hot water heaters, and so on and so forth. And then what is also going on with your, you can turn on switches and hubs and all kinds of things. So this is why I use all these different devices. It isn't the easiest way to configure things. If you're looking for a very simple configuration, then you probably want to go with the Solar Assistant. It's very simple. Click, point, click, set it up, walk away, forget about it. It's there for statistics. You can set up remote access if you want it very easy. You pay the $40 a year and you're set and done. You can even pay them, I think, off of their website. I think what we saw was you can even buy a completely and totally built system for $169 where you do nothing but plug a wire into it and turn it on, and you're basically finished. They're very simple to do, and that was exactly what mine was. That was before I knew really what I was doing and how I was going to do it. But got off track a little bit, but I think I covered a large portion of this. So the real world case for this is for those of us that are off grid, that are monitoring every bit of power. Think of it as you're on a farm and you have to pump well water up into a storage tank. The last thing you want to do is have to do that at 3 in the morning when your batteries are low. So what you would want to do in a case like that is program Home Assistant to turn that well pump on at 3 in the afternoon when your batteries are full and the extra energy is going nowhere. And this allows you to pump your tanks up. If you have a sensor on the tanks, you can say when the tanks get full or when they get close to full to shut off and to no longer pump it. I've heard people turning on heaters for their pools in their backyard. If you've got a bunch of solar panels on your house and instead of letting that energy just go nowhere, or if you're not set up to feed back to the grid, then you can turn on a heat pump for your pool and that excess energy gets burned off that way. So there are tons of ways to use energy that is a smarter way when you have the tools that you need to make that happen. And that's what Home Assistant, Solar Assistant, the Venus OS system with Victron devices all combined together give me access to do is, and this is actually just in an RV. In a home, there's so much more that I would automate. There's so much more that you could take care of. For example, in a home, a lot of the times you're paying premium for electricity during prime time hours. That means between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., your electricity is 5 times more than it is any other time. Well, it would be easy to configure something to say, at 5 o'clock, you shut off the hot water heater. You simply don't run. The hot water is still in the tank. It's going to be there until 9 o'clock. It's not like it's going away. But you don't want that hot water heater running excessively during that time frame when the electricity is costing you $3 a kilowatt hour as opposed to 15 or 30 cents a kilowatt hour. So things like that are where Home Assistant and Solar Assistant are extremely useful. And that is what this week is all about. Now, the configuration piece of this is where things get extremely complicated. The MQTT is not for the faint of heart. You're having to basically take a configuration of a communication messaging service and merge multiple messaging services into a single service. Now, fortunately, Home Assistant does provide for a way to do so under one of their configurations. And I will post a link down below to another video from where I learned how to configure them. If you want to learn to configure them, that you can do that. It is not a faint of heart process. There has been several people that have talked to me and we've walked through step by step how to do this. I do not have a video on specifically how to do this, but I do have a source location of where I have done it. And so the key here is why would you want to combine them? The solar assistant allows you easy access to get to the data off your solar system, get information out of your inverter, get information out of your batteries, get information in a combined system out and extract it. The home assistant allows you to link into local devices, control devices, light switches, wall plates, power switches, relays, turn things on, turn things off, and control things based on that data you get from the solar system. So you're needing to use both of these systems to get to it. The Venus system is nothing more than a private local application for a specific piece of hardware that links into it. It needs to be managed separately because of the complexity around the way they operate, the way Victron operates and stuff. It isn't as globally connectable as some of the others. They are changing, and the fact that they released the Venus OS system itself shows that they are changing and making things better. But the purpose behind all that is to really give you the control over all of these platforms from one place. And that's what Home Assistant is really doing. It's giving you the control of all of this equipment. Now, one of the key questions that I get is this bi-directional? And I do have some questions that we'll go over here in a few minutes, but I want to handle this one before we get there. Is it bi-directional, and can I control things from some of these? And the answer is yes and no. I can control things like light switches and wall plates and stuff like that. I can also control that from within Solar Assistant is allowed to control by changing those configurations. In other words, I can change the charge rate of AC power, whether it's 60 amps or 40 amps or 20 amps. That is a configurable item within Solar Assistant. Therefore, I can make it a configurable item in Home Assistant. I can't add on items that aren't already there. And in some cases, like Victron and stuff, a lot of that information is purely read-only. And so the Victron OS is not really have the configurability that I would get from the Solar Assistant. Now, you ask what some of those items are in Solar Assistant. And if we go into the big one here is under these configurations, if I go into right here under settings, you will see that I have some inverter controls that I have control over. I can set the absorption rate, the float charge, the maximum charge, the grid charge. I can set whether if it's going to be charging based on time, which is the time that we configured on the other screen, or whether it's going to be doing it based on state of charge, or any other configuration that they want to set. So you can configure these things, and you can just edit this and say, okay, I want this based on state of charge, and I want to, instead of it going off at 45%, I want it to go off at 50%. So it'll come on at 16 and shut off at 50. So you can easily configure some of those, and then that is relayed back to the MQTT server, and then that's read from the Home Assistant, this is the Home Assistant, and Solar Assistant, I'm sorry. And the Solar Assistant gives that back to the inverter, and the inverter makes that change. Not a lot different from using the EG4 app itself to go in and change it, and it relays it back to the inverter, and the inverter makes the change. So, yes, you can, but there's limited amount of items that you can go in and make those changes to. It isn't unlimited, it isn't configurable, there isn't no amount of configuration that really is going to change that. It's whatever was originally programmed in to both the inverter and the Solar Assistant, and not necessarily are they all the same. It has to be compatible with all of the items all the way through the chain of command and then all the way back also. In some of the screens, you can see a list of all the items that are available. And if I go over here to Home Assistant I think I have a test page here that just lists all my fields. Let me see if I can find it. Don't use it very often. Maybe it's this one here. Yeah, so this has all the different fields that are available for everything. And you can see here, my DIY battery, it also has a couple of, whether the balancing is turned on, whether the charge is turned on, whether the discharge is turned on. Those are configurable off and on, whether I can change them and tune them. So every device depends on if the bidirectional communication is allowed to happen. And then I go down a little. Over here is the lux power. So you can see here I've got the the voltage and how it's charging, how it's discharging, what those time slots are, what is the starting capacity, ending capacity. And these are basically the same fields that we saw over here on this device under the configuration and under the Solar Assistant under this configuration, as you will see over here under Home Assistant. And that's because if the inverter makes it available, then the Home Assistant does, or Solar Assistant does its best to make it available, and then Home Assistant has the ability to make it configurable also. But each one of them has to support it in order for it to make it all the way up and down that chain of command. So you can see here, there are quite a few fields, and to be honest with you, this list has grown considerably over the last 6 or 12 months. I think when I first hooked up Home Assistant, I only had about 3 or 4 of these fields where I could actually do it, which was the charge voltage and when it started and when it ended, and that was about it. So you can see now they've opened it up to pretty much all of them. And so this kind of gives you an idea of all the different fields that are available and all the different things that I can get to, and some level of details that I can see with the amount of power coming in through leg 1 and leg 2 and you know what the CT clamps are seeing and everything. So you can get to all of these devices. But the whole point of this is Home Assistant is that central repository that brings in all the content from all of these devices and gives you the control to script around it and say, if this happens, I want to do this. Or if that happens, I want to do this. And if this happens and that's happening at the same time, then I want to do this. It allows those complex controls of what's going on and allows you to do it. Now, I think I've gone over really how you can set this up to do it, or why you would set this up to do it, not necessarily how. How is configuring those MQTT servers, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, that this is impossible to show on a live stream. I will be making some videos on exactly how you would configure a Home Assistant, configure a Solar Assistant, and connect them both to the MQTT servers and get them synchronized together. That will be a video that I'm coming out with, and if that's something you're interested in, please encourage me to put it at a higher priority and put a comment either down below, and if you're watching it in a replay, put a comment down saying that you would like to see it also, because that'll help me prioritize it and get it taken care of earlier. I'm going to move over and answer a couple of questions that came in when I was building this program. A lot of the times I get questions about about what I'm working on from different individuals and stuff from different sources. And so I put those questions together in this with a little help from ChatGPT. That makes them easy to get them into a script and get them organized for you. So I'm going to see if I can get to them without too much trouble here. All right, I think I need to go here. All right. So the first question is John, and he's asking, can Solar Assistant work with my inverter brand, or is it only specific ones? And John, this was found in the links, and I'll turn the links back on here for a few minutes while I answer your question. This is definitely, you can, so it does not support all, but it does support a very large number of them. And I'm actually looking for that website again real quick. And here it is. Okay, so you can see here down this, I'm going to move that link over here. All right. So you can see here that the brands that are accepted are this list here, and you can click on these links. There is a link to that on that QR code. Just go to the Solar Assistant and you can pull it up right off of their website. And they maintain that, and they have a marvelous beta program where they're constantly updating, having new products come out. People like myself get to try them out, make sure that they all work, and then when they get them nice and solid, that's when they release them out to the public. But they do a fantastic job of maintaining all of their different inverters and keeping them up to date. And you can see here, there's a list of inverters here, a list of batteries here, grids that are supported, different access devices from iPhones and that kind of thing, dashboards and historical data and all kinds of different things that are supported. Even talks here about Home Assistant and how to set up the broker and stuff, and some basic information there to do exactly what this program is all about. So that is the answer to that. So technically, yes, it supports a lot. No, not all of them, unfortunately. I wish it did support everything, but there's nothing at this point. The industry is so broadly defined at this point, there's just too many of them to do. All right, I need to find the next question. Is I already use an EG4 app. What would Solar Assistant give me that I don't already have? I think I really pretty much answered that, but it basically gives you more details, more analysis, and the deeper you go, the more analysis it gets from the EG4 app, where you're basically stuck with the basic details of what the inverter's doing, to the Solar Assistant, which is more specific around charts and graphs and letting you know over time what's happening, to Home Assistant, which is basically unbound by your imagination, where you can link in other devices, automate things and stuff. So each step takes you to a different level, but all of them provide you more information than the base information on the EG4 app. From my perspective, the most important thing that I find that it does for me is it gives me the automation control to turn things off and on, and to effectively use my power more efficiently. In addition to that, especially when you first get into solar, you kind of start obsessing on how you use the electricity and what's it doing and how much is it collecting and how much is it not collecting. And it gives you that visibility into it and allows you to get all those dashboards built and see exactly what you want to see. Each one of the screens that you saw in that, each one of the screens that you saw in my Home Assistant, which if I go back over here to it, each one of these that you see is something that I have built over a period of time, from battery review to my JK battery when I was doing my building my JK battery, of what I wanted to see with that, to my EG4 batteries when I was connecting them up through Solar Assistant, as opposed to taking them through just seeing them directly in the inverter, to master status, which is basically in my overall, where I had temperature gauges and a status bar across the top showing me different charge levels and different states and different temperatures, and what's on and what's not on. There's a little icon that shows up here when my hot water heater's on. All of these show me I have an air conditioner running using 966 watts here. The one in the bedroom's using 152 watts. My refrigerator's running at 175 watts. The island, which has the coffee pot and those type of things on it, is using 96 watts, which probably means the water filter is running, because there isn't really a whole lot there that would be running. It's only 100 watts other than the water filter. My batteries are at 69%. All of these items I have built over time as I've found the need for them. This one basically can estimate how long the charge time that I have. So at the current rate, I could run for about 50 hours is what it would take. It's going down at 0.1% per hour. I'm using 37 watts at that. Obviously, once the sun starts to go down, that's not going to be true anymore. So then we have the power chart, and this was basically my attempt to build the Servo GX type screen to give me a status of what was going on, total usage for the day, current usage, and put it all into one little consolidated little piece and stuff like that. And then we have PV details, and this is when I was hooking up the solar shed, and you can see here I've got two strings coming into the 6000 XP off of the roof of the RV. That's string 1, that's string 2, and then this is the Victron, which is string 3 that comes from the solar shed. And what the power coming in is, and how many amps is that generating, and how much of that is going into the battery, and what is the state of charge, and what consumption rate, which when we started this program, if you remember correctly, we were using only 75% of the power that we were generating. Now we're using 112% of the power that we're generating. So now we've gone from, as the sun goes down, for generating more power than we can use, to using more power than we generate. And so this is the ups and flows of a solar system over the period of a day. I went into this one, and you can see here I got a power chart here of this is basically just amps, and played with some amp charts and stuff like that, which this isn't too particularly helpful unless I'm trying to debug, did I have an up or a down area. Victron history, this shows me what that Victron system does every day and gives me history of every single day of how much it generated, how long it's set in float mode, how long it's set in absorption mode, which allows me to configure things like turning on the hot water heater and well pumps and stuff like that more effectively when I can see the statistics and look through them and say, wow, I didn't realize that, every day I've got 3 hours of float mode where my battery's hitting 100%, but only in February. Who would have thought in February and March that I'm 100% off grid and never need the grid? I mean, it got so bad in February and March, I didn't even have the grid connected. I had the hose rolled up and stuck in the RV because I didn't want to do the sun damage for something I never used. I was kind of surprised to see when summer came along and I got more sun that I needed more for the air conditioners, unfortunately. Now I know for a fact I'm 10 kilowatt hours a day short of running everything that I would run on off grid. And that's talking no conservation, no pretending that I'm on solar and I'm going to be conservative. This is just use whatever the heck I want. And if I had an extra 10 kilowatt hours, if I could take those panels off that solar shed and place them on a roof somewhere, I would be 100% off grid year round. And I know that for a fact, not just playing around with, I estimated it. Lights and automation. This is my get up in the morning, turn things on, turn things off kind of thing, where the wife says, I'm going to bed, can you turn on the fan, can you turn on the air conditioner, can you do this and can you do that? And when I go to bed, I lay down in bed and say, well, did I turn off the lights in the shed, or did I turn off this, or did I turn off that? I can easily pull this off and look down here and see that, oh yeah, the shed lights are still on, and oh, the porch lights are still on. Yeah, and I can turn all of these off. If it happens all the time, I can build an automation script that says, hey, just go shut these off at this time every night. I know I'm not going to be using it at that point. And if they're already off, then don't bother. That's the real power of doing this and what it allows you to do. So that's a very long-winded answer to, if I use, what does this give me that the EG4 app don't give me? It gives you everything compared to a simple EG4 app, which gives you really some base statistics on what's going on for monitoring what's going on with your system, of how much power you're using in and out, and whether or not there's, you've got grid connected or not. And some basic charts here that you might be able to do it. Now, that said, it also, the EG4 app gives me upgrades and stuff like that, and hardware upgrades and firmware that I can't do within a home assistant, but I don't need to. What I need is something that merged all this data together to give me control over my environment and what I have going on. Okay, moving on to the next question. I think I thoroughly answered that one more than a few times. That is the wrong screen. There we go. All right, so does the solar assistant need internet to run, or can it be run completely offline? Okay, so solar assistant and home assistant both can run independently on a local network. Apparently, obviously, that's good. They do not have to be connected to the internet. You do not have to have them. As a matter of fact, when I'm at home, I don't ever connect to my home assistant through the internet, because it's slower. Obviously, it goes out to the internet, talks to a proxy server, which talks back to it, which determines what it says and then sends it on to me and relays it and all that. When I'm at home, I connect directly to the home assistant. Same thing's true with the solar assistant. It's much easier to just connect directly to it and get the information straight from it. But as soon as I walk out to the door, as soon as I get in my car and I start to to drive off, I can still get to all my information only because it's connected to the internet. But does it have to be? No. The EG4 app doesn't have to be, the solar assistant doesn't have to be, and home assistant doesn't have to be. Is it easier to do it if it is? Yes, it's easier if it does have internet. Is it necessary? No, it is absolutely not necessary. Brian asked, is solar assistant just monitoring, or can it control my system? the Solar Assistant has some basic controls that we went over, and I'll quickly touch on them again. You can control some of these configurations, and it does have a limited amount of automation, which I did play here with a little bit. So you can add some automation of, do you want to change, do you want to control the float charge value based on this happening or based on that happening? I found that they're very restrictive and very limited in what they can do. And the fields that this can change, I can also change within Home Assistant. So with Home Assistant, the rules are a lot easier to build than they are within Solar Assistant. Now the question was, Solar Assistant, can it do it? Yes, it can change things. Yes, it does have some automation. No, it is not anywhere near as good as what you would get here with this Home Assistant variation of the rules that it has here. If you go into the automation scenes here, you can build these out if this and this, or this and that in this, do this plus that, if this, if that. You can build very complex automations in the Home Assistant. But yes, both of them can control to a certain extent your system for you and build things. The thing that Solar Assistant don't do that Home Assistant does do is Solar Assistant don't connect to regular home automation items like the light switches and the wall plugs and access to, I can turn on circuits for my hot water heaters or fans or any of that kind of stuff. That's the thing that you don't get from Solar Assistant. And then, so hopefully that answers that question. Next is Lisa from Florida. Oh, hello, other Floridian. How hard is it to set up Solar Assistant for the first time? Solar Assistant is very easy. You literally, if you order their prepackaged product, you take it out of the box, you plug in a network cable, you turn it on. There's an IP address, a 192.168 or on your local network. You go to that IP address through a web browser. You tell it what your internet configuration stuff is, and it starts up. And then from there, you go to this screen here, this configuration screen, which will have the internet already configured, and you set the inverter, and you click go, and you're done. It is literally a 10-minute project at most. It works you'll spend more time reading the documentation, finding the IP address, than you will actually connecting it to I was stunned how simple it is. Home Assistant is a whole different ball of wax. Everything has to be configured from your perspective. If you're installing it on a Raspberry Pi, you have to flash an image onto the SDD, which you can do that for Solar Assistant also. For only $50, you can get a license of the software, and you can flash your own image onto the Raspberry Pi or Raspberry Orange or one of them. Just be very careful that you get the compatible hardware with what works with Solar Assistant, and the same thing's true with Home Assistant, and the same thing's true with Venus. And the strange thing about them is all three of them have different compatibilities. It seems that the Raspberry Pi 4 is the most commonly used across all of them. Raspberry Pi 5 don't work with Venus yet. Raspberry Pi 5 I don't think works with Solar Assistant, but it might. It definitely works with 4 and 3. Home Assistant I don't think works with 3. And there's a whole combination. Just make sure you look at the equipment and get the right equipment for the job you're trying to do there. Otherwise, you'll end up buying the wrong Raspberry Pi, the wrong equipment, and then it won't work. If I already have Solar Assistant, why would I also need Home Assistant? Home Assistant gives you a much more controlled environment over switches and devices and home automation. If all you're looking to do is report on your Solar Assistant, and what you see in Solar Assistant is exactly what you're looking for, you don't need to go any further. If what you want is to elaborate on that, build your own reports, look at the own statistics, use use a reporting tool, Grafana, bleh, to report, build your own reports and stuff, then you want Home Assistant, much more control, automation, controlling of devices, and all of that. Reporting tools, the whole shebang. But if what you see is in Solar Assistant, and that's what you want, and you don't want to add to it, you don't want fancy reports, you don't want to build anything, you don't want to configure anything else, you're not interested in anything else, just do the Solar Assistant and skip the Home Assistant. Home Assistant is much more complex. Do I need to be a programmer to use Home Assistant? No, you don't need to be a programmer, but it doesn't hurt. And I say that tongue-in-cheek. There are a lot of people that configure Home Assistant and get away with it without there being any programming whatsoever. You can turn on devices, you can automate things, you can see from the scripts that, some of the scripts that we have here, and let's just say, see if I've got one here. Yeah, here we go. So here's a very simple script a rule that I've done is turn the fans on in the solar compartment in the RV when the grid power goes above 1,000 watts. In other words, if there's enough grid power coming in that's going to generate heat, in my mind, it's going to generate enough heat that I want to vent that heat out of the thing. So anytime I see the grid power go above 1,000 watts, it automatically says, okay, when this condition is met, turn on the bay fans. And then I have a separate rule that says, if the temperature is below this and the humidity is above that, and if if all of these are true, then turn the bay fans off. So that allows me to have 4 or 5 different ways to turn on the bay fans. The temperature goes too high, the humidity is too low, the this or that, or any of these things are met, then it can turn the fans on. And all of these also have to be true in order to turn it off. And so, but it allows the type of rules, and it allows it without any real programming. As you can see from this, it's a very simple drop down. Then I want to take the Shelly device, which is called the bay fans, and I want to turn the bay fans on. Configuring a Shelly device is easy. You hook it up. You got to be more of an electrician than you need to be a programmer. You hook up the Shelly device and connect it to your electrical system, and you can set up wall switches and wall plugs and lights and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure there is a video for that. Let me see if I've got a Shelly connection video. If I do, I will add it to the show notes that are in the that QR code there, and that way you can get to it later and see it. So the short of this one is that no, you don't need to be a programmer. A lot of the stuff is made very user-friendly through nice configuration screens and drop-down menus and stuff like that. There are some things, like I like to play with some of the higher level electronics, the ESP32s, where I can configure sensor devices and motion detectors and light detectors and that kind of stuff. And if you're going to do that, I want to configure a couple of CT sensors to measure a few things and play with some stuff like that. That kind of electronic, then you do have to do some YAML file programming, and so would you call that programming? I don't know. It's a configuration file, but it can be kind of complex. Home Assistant has some configuration screens too, that when I was configuring a lot of the sensors and stuff, my own calculated sensors of, I want the wattage from this set of solar panels and from this device over here and this device over here, and I want to put them together. You had to actually understand, basic algebra and how the sensors worked and build those kind of formulas into the thing. So do you need to be a programmer? No. Does it help? Sure. But can you get through without it? Yes, you can. There's tons of help out there. So it wasn't really absolutely necessary by any means. Then we have Mark from Florida. Oh, another Floridian. Can Home Assistant control appliances based on solar production level? Home Assistant absolutely can control devices based on production levels. No questions asked, and a lot of other things too. Temperatures, humidities, rain, all kinds of things. The Home Assistant's unlimited what you can do. You can build rules around anything, any sensor, anywhere. Especially with AI, now there's things where you can say if you see a face and it's a certain person, you can unlock a door. or things like that. I mean, there's just some crazy stuff in Home Assistant you can do. Alan says, what is the biggest advantage to Home Assistant compared to other smart home hubs? There's only one that I can point out, and I don't know enough about all the other smart home hubs. I like the fact that it's open source, it works with a big variety of devices, and it's free. And it's got a huge market of people out there that play with it and provide home, and it's not closed market, and you don't have somebody telling you what I can and can't do. If I want to use a Zigbee device, I do. If I want to use a Home Depot device, I do. If I want to use some mini split from, that I bought off of Amazon from some random dealer, in most cases, I can. That's what I like about it, is the flexibility. Are there other ones that are as good as that? To be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't played with them as much because they all cost a lot of money, and there's no reason to spend the money when there's a free version of it out. Rebecca from Michigan asks, can I access my Home Assistant dashboard when I'm away from home? Yes, you can. There is a subscription service to do it. I think it's $35, $40 a year, and it basically gives you remote access from anywhere in the world. The same thing's true with with Solar Assistant, by the way. What exactly is Victron Venus, and why would I need it? Victron Venus is the same as a Servo GX. It is basically a central hub for your Victron system. And if you have a Servo GX, you do not need the Victron Venus system. It is basically the same software. It's basically a hub. It is the Home Assistant or the Solar Assistant for the Victron devices. It allows you to connect everything to it, and it manages talking with your smart charge controller, talks with the Victron Smart Shunt. It talks with the Victron inverter. It determines how much power it needs. All this communication and everything. It's the central hub of communicating for Victron equipment. I use it for controlling and managing in here because a Victron Servo GX is $200-300. And there was no reason to have that when I wasn't going to use any of the screens or anything that went along with it. All I wanted was it to send all that data back to an MQTT server so I could get the access to it within Home Assistant, because having access to it in the Victron system is only useful when everything is in Victron. And with other brand equipment, I can't do everything in Victron. Erica M asks, for someone running Victron gear, do I still need Solar Assistant or is Venus enough? If you are running all Victron gear, then you do, and if you have a Servo GX, it is the Venus system. It is the central hub that gives you reports and analysis for your data. If you do not have a Servo GX, you can use it to feed data to, and I'll see if I can show you this. So you can see here, I have my solar system connected to my PV and that. But I also have another dashboard here for the solar shed, which only thing it has out there is a charge controller for the 12-volt solar sheds build that we did. Now, I didn't want to buy a giant Servo GX for hundreds of dollars so that I could monitor this and so that I could see what was going on and keep track of it. So I basically had a Raspberry Pi sitting there. I flashed it with the Venus system. I connected the charge controller to it, and voila, I have access here in the Victron VRM to it. It's great for that. So the question was if someone's running Victron gear, do they still need Solar Assistant? I needed it because I don't have just Victron gear. If you do, and you have a Servo GX, and you have a screen, and you have this built onto a screen in your van or your RV or your house, then no, there's no reason for it. That's Solar Assistant at all at that point. Let's see, going back to the next question. Where was I? There it is. Tom from Ohio asks, can Venus OS send data to both Home Assistant and Solar Assistant at the same time? No. The Venus OS system sends data to the MQTT server. That is in turn read by the Home Assistant. Now, can it cause things to happen that it then changes things and sends that over to the Solar Assistant, and the Solar Assistant sends it to your inverter? Yes. Does it do it natively? No, you would have to write rules to do it, but it doesn't communicate with any of those devices other than put that data into the MQTT server, and then the Home Assistant takes all the MQTT servers, combines them all together, and then uses it as a source of information, and then relays it back down that chain in order to make them communicate. Is Venus OS for Victron gear, or can it integrate with other brands? It is almost exclusively for the Venus gear. I'm sure it can read some batteries and things from other gear, but for the majority of the time, it is basically a Victron product. It's the Victron software that runs the Servo GX. There is even a box out, and I don't think I have a link to it. There is a Venus OS. Let's see if I can find a link to it, because it's kind of cool. Victron Venus OS hardware, maybe. Yeah, I'm not seeing it here. I thought I had a picture of it. Oh, there it is. Here, let me see if I can show you this. So over on the Venus, on so this one is the Venus OS, and they do have a piece of like a Raspberry Pi piece of equipment. So you can see here the Servo GX, the Servo, they have like the screen that goes with it and gives you, the touch where you can look at things and see things on different size screens. And they've got the 70 and the 50, and these are bigger screens and smaller screens and stuff like that. And this is the Venus OS hardware. Now, I don't know why you would do this as opposed to buying the Servo GX itself, unless there's a huge price difference. But they call it Venus GS, which would be interesting to see if Amazon has the Venus OS. Venus no, it's not Venus OS. What is it? Venus GX. Oh yeah, look at that, 178. So yeah, you save a few bucks from the 234 that you're going to find for the GX. But really, I'm not sure. I would have to look a little bit closer to see what the benefits of it are, because I can't imagine that if I had the choice between that and that I would just pick the Servo GX and have all the native plugs and not have all the different, because you can see from this, the plugs are quite different. They're little screw caps and stuff where you can connect things up. So from my standpoint, no, I wouldn't do it that way. But that doesn't mean there isn't a good reason to do it. I just don't know what that reason is. All right. Moving on to the next question is Karen from California. How does the VRM portal compare to using Home Assistant or remote access? The VRM portal is basically just that basic data that you've got and little control over the different equipment there. It's not super. Let me just kind of give you an idea of what I mean. It is not super easy to read like this is here, where you have all these great charts and all this history and stuff like this. Although, I say that, but that's probably because I'm familiar with it. If I used the Victron system on a day-to-day basis and was always in their reports and stuff, my suspicion is that there'd be some variation of this that I could do that. There's some reports and stuff here that I could probably use. Yeah, see, I haven't even opened them up and used them. So it's kind of hard for me to say, but from my standpoint, this is a much more intuitive preset type of configuration that gives you the basic information that you need. But I'm not really familiar enough with Victron equipment to really speak to their level of reporting and stuff. I'm sure there's some Victron people that have a whole lot better experience than I do with that. And What is the best way to connect the three platforms without conflicts? Now, this is a great question because the only way that I found to do it is that you have each of these devices, Home Assistant, Solar Assistant, and the Venus system, all three have a what I call the server, but they call them the, see if I can get you the right terminology here so that I don't get, give you bad information. The terminology that they use is each one of them has their own broker. And the broker is like a server, but it's the broker of all the messages. So when I configure the Solar Assistant's broker, and you can see that here on this screen here, when I configure this Solar Assistant's broker down here, it basically allows anyone that wants to connect and get those messages that are coming from Solar Assistant from that server or from that broker. The problem is, in order for you to use this information from Home Assistant, you can only point it to one broker. So you have to go in and find a way to get all the messages from all the different servers and combine them together. And that is wherein, I think I can show you, I think I stripped out some of the passwords and stuff. And if I didn't, then I'll have to change them. But let me see if I can just show you on the add-in piece here under the Home Assistant. So an add-on to Home Assistant is code that runs next to the Home Assistant. It's not necessarily a plug-in in Home Assistant. So the Mosquito broker, which is the MQTT server broker, the broker actually runs independently of it. But again, it's a broker that's Home Assistant's broker. So now you have a Solar Assistant broker, a Home Assistant broker, a Venus OS broker, and all of them have their own little brokers, but you have to figure out a way to get all of that data together in a single broker so that you can tell Home Assistant, hey, go over to this server and pull all this data in, and all the configuration will be there, because you can't say go to this one, go to this one, go to this one, go to this one, go to this one. You have to tell it one location to get it from. It's designed to be a central hub or a broker of information. What they didn't take into account is that when you have 5 or 6 different systems, you got 5 or 6 different brokers now. But here, if you look under configuration, you'll see my configuration for this is not here. Let me see if I can get to it from, no, I can't because I'm remote. So normally what I would do is I would go and pull up the configuration file, but what it basically says is that it's a special configuration within the broker that says, hey, there's another broker over here. I want you to go get these subject matter from that server and put it over here. And anything that I change over here, I want you to put back over there. And that allows a connection between these two servers. And you have to do that for each one of these brokers and have them all coming in and out of the Home Assistant broker. That's the one that I need to make a video on, and that's the one that I was having problems coming up with. How was I going to show you on a live stream how to configure that? Because I need to actually be at the RV where the equipment is in order to have all those systems available, and I needed to mess with my computer and image things while I have a live stream going, which just isn't possible. So that one will have to come out as a video and not come out as a live stream. All right, next question is, besides MQTT, are there other ways these systems can talk to each other? Yes, some of the devices will talk directly to other devices. In other words, Solar Assistant talks directly to an inverter. The batteries can talk directly to Solar Assistant. The batteries can, the Home Assistant talks directly to my JK BMS. So there are a lot of exceptions to the MQTT. The cool part about MQTT is once you get it working, you have home devices like light switches and stuff where you can say, hey, the broker is over here, just go put all my data over there. And that allows you to control light switches and stuff from that broker. And then you can build rules around it that says when the sun goes down 10 minutes before sunset, go over to the MQQ broker and put a record over there that says turn this light on. And then that light switch would see that in that broker and turn on. And so that allows you that type of control. But Are there other than MQTT? Yes, there are, but MQTT is where I see a lot of the standards coming to, but there is a lot of other direct communication, and it is by far not the only protocol out there. Zigbee has its own protocol. Shelly has its own protocol. Now, it does honor the MQTT, but it doesn't have to necessarily be MQTT. All of these devices, all of these automation and home devices all have their own. Even the ones from Home Depot don't use the MQTT. There's a special add-on for Home Assistant that you configure them and say, hey, I want you to go talk to these devices, and it knows how to communicate with them natively. Or you can configure them to use MQTT. Some people prefer it one way, some people prefer it the other. I like to do the direct connect to the device when I can and use MQTT as a secondary device. I don't like having somebody in the middle that I have to tell a message to and then it has to pass the message on. I want to be able to just tell it straight to the to Home Assistant so that the data is more spontaneous and there's less traffic. And I'm sure we're going to get to that question of running Home Assistant and Solar Assistant over Wi-Fi as opposed to wired here. At some point, somebody had to ask that. How much overlap is there between Solar Assistant and Victron Venus data? Well, that is a loaded question. The Victron Venus data makes all of its configuration data and all of its analytical data available to you. You will see here in the, and I'm going to show it to you in Home Assistant because it's easiest to show it to you, but keeping in mind, this went through both systems to get here. So if I go over to the master stat, if I go over to the, where is it? The PV and go to the Victron, all of this data comes from the Victron Venus system. Even the day's histories, day 12, day 13, 14 days ago, 15 days ago, 16 days ago, 17 days. This all comes from the Venus system and is basically a direct path to what it has. So the Venus system basically just takes everything that it's got and dumps it out there. And anytime any of it changes, it sends a new message saying, hey, this data changed. So you have access to all of it all the time. Now, do you necessarily use it all like I did? No, I probably didn't use 10% of the data that's available. I probably used less than 5% of the data from the inverter. Probably used less than 5 or 10% of the data coming from Solar Assistant. There's tons of data out there. So no, how much the overlap is there? There's quite a bit of overlap because everything that's in Venus goes to the Solar Assistant, or everything that's in your inverter goes to Solar Assistant, everything in the Solar Assistant goes to the Home Assistant. This question specifically asks overlap between Solar Assistant and Venus, and the answer there would be 0, because the data that's coming in from the Venus system is coming from your Victron devices, and your Solar Assistant is connected to whatever inverter. Now, if they're both connected to the same inverter, then there would be a lot of overlap. If they're not, which I would assume they wouldn't be, then there would be very little overlap. All right, next item on the list is, do I need a separate Raspberry Pi for each platform, or can they share hardware? I have them installed on separate ones, and my assumption is that you will need to have a separate Raspberry Pi for each of them. That doesn't mean that you can't get a bigger computer and build images and virtual machines and put them on the virtual machines. I haven't done it, but I would assume that you have to flash the Venus OS system to a full operating system that runs the Venus OS. Raspberry Pi is the same way, and Solar Assistant is the same way. Can you run them the other ways? I don't know. I don't think so, unless they're running in virtual machines, which is basically saying they're all separate machines. Felicia says, what is the easiest first integration to try if I'm new? Solar Assistant. First, you want to get Solar Assistant and see if you even need the data, if you like the data, if having it available to you feeds the addiction, makes you happy, or if you want more. I started with nothing. I used just the EG4 app. And then I was like, well, I want to be able to track this and I want to be able to track that. So I went to Solar Assistant and I was very happy with it for a few months. And then I decided, well, I want to be able to control this and control that device and turn this on and turn that off. And I was like, but it was very daunting. Home Assistant was very daunting at first. It was very complex. There's a lot to it. But it's one of those things you just start one piece at a time. You do a search on Google for how do you do this? And it one after another, you just start knocking them down and you start building screens. When you start, I had one screen. It was, here's the state of charge and here's how long it's going to take for my batteries to get fully charged. That was all I had. A little bit of mathematics there to say, this is how much power is coming in, this is how much state of charge I got left, and do the math and say, there's the answer. Then I just started building things out one at a time. I wanted a screen that looked a lot like the Victron Servo GX screen. So I built one of them. Then I wanted a screen that told me what my battery charge, my batteries look like, what the individual charge of each one was. And that led me to, well, I can't really see that coming through the inverter. So I had to connect them directly to Solar Assistant. And then that gave me more statistics. And then that led me to, well, if I have all this power, then what should I turn on when I have too much power? And what should I turn off when I have too little power? Like for right now, the one I'm debating building here in the next week is the new solar shed. When the batteries get full in the solar shed, I'm not going to let the power just sit there and go nowhere. So what I'm going to do is have it turn on a switch that turns on the charge inverter in the solar shed and charges the batteries to the in the RV from the extra assessed battery power in the solar shed. It'll drain those batteries down to about 50% and then it'll shut off. At 50%, I have more than enough to do all the laundry I want to do and yet still get 100% of the charge coming in from the solar panels. So that's kind of the plan now, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's something you build slowly over a period of time. Oliver asks, can I build a dashboard that shows both my Victron and Solar Assistant data together? Yes, absolutely. With Home Assistant, you can mix all the data together. Matter of fact, almost all of my screens do exactly that. I use the Victron device for state of charge and for the solar shed. I use the Solar Assistant for figures coming from my inverter, and I use the Solar Assistant for figures coming through my EG4 batteries. I use Home Assistant to connect directly to my DIY batteries, to connect to my Zigbee devices, connect to my Shelly devices, and all of them are all intertwined and completely transparent. Half the time I don't even know where the figures come from. Sometimes I got to go back and hunt down, okay, how did I get this here and what is this? And then on top of that, what's really cool about Home Assistant is it allows you to build complex variables. In other words, instead of just saying how much do the solar panels in the inverter generate, I can say, I want you to create me a total solar power from the panels in string 1 on the inverter, the panels on string 2 in inverter, and the Victron device panels, and I want you to add all 3 of them together and call this total PV power. And therefore, then when I go to look at this, I don't have to add them up every time. I just say, hey, what's the total PV power? And the total PV power is all 3 of them added together, and then you can use that and build on that. And it's kind of like, I hate to say it, it's kind of like geometry class. When you start building proofs of things that you have in the past, you get to use them in your next formula. Same thing's true with Home Assistant. Once you build that value, once you get it set up and you get it working, then you get to use it forever to do exactly that. They've got what they call meters, where you can go in and say, well, if I've got a device that reports how many kilowatt hours of energy I've used up to this point in time, then I want to know how much power I used today and how much power I used yesterday and how much power I used this week. So I can set up a meter that says, I want you to meter this outlet based on usage every day. I want you to meter this outlet based on usage every day for yesterday. I want you to meter this outlet based on this week's usage. I want you to meter this outlet based on this month's usage. I want you to meter this outlet based on this year's thing. And then you have all of those values available to use and build reports. Like I built a simple version of that for this chart here, power usage. And you can see over here on the right, those are all meters. All of those data right there, those are all meters of daily usage for the living room air conditioner, daily usage for the bedroom air conditioner, daily usage for the hot water heater, daily usage for the plug, the bay plug, which is basically in the bay, which runs the Raspberry Pi and the Venus OS and all of those type of things. I thought when I first configured that it was going to be a lot of power. I used 0.15 kilowatt hours. It's almost not even worth having the device there to measure it. How much usage on the outlet that runs the refrigerator? How much usage on the island in the RV that has, the coffee pots and the water purifier attached to it? All of these things were things I needed to know so that I could build a better system and understand what doesn't work. And one of the very first things I learned is the air conditioners in a factory RV stink. And my power usage from 20 or 25 kilowatt hours a day was 55 and 60 kilowatt a day. And all of it, 80% of it, was power from those two air conditioners. So that was the first thing I got rid of. Yanked them out of there, put a couple extra solar panels on the roof, and put in mini splits. Got rid of those air conditioners together, cut my power cost in half by by two appliances being replaced. Now, there's some things that are a convenience factor, and no matter what you do, you're not going to get rid of them. Let's talk about coffee pots. Could I turn on the coffee pot, make coffee, and when I'm done, pour myself a cup of coffee and shut it off? Yes, but I'm not going to. My wife sets the coffee pot to start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and when she finishes the pot, she either shuts it off or it times out and goes off in 2.5 hours. And it runs that whole time. So am I going to change that daily island meter usage? No, probably not. Could I? Yes, I absolutely could. But having solar isn't only about being the most efficient and not using as much energy as you want. Having solar is about having all the energy you want and it not costing you anything. Having the independence to not have to send somebody an extra buck because I want to heat my pool because I have solar panels and have extra energy, or have to turn my hot water heater off all the time. It's not all about payback. It's about freedom sometimes, it's about convenience sometimes, and it's about the weird thing that you can't really explain to people is when you go solar and you get enough power to do 95% of the things that you have to do, then you start figuring out weird ways to use electricity when you have more than you need. You start coming up with things that you would never think of. I mean, there are tons of people out there that do solar power dump devices. I've seen them from where they take fish tank heaters and hook up 10 or 12 of them and drop it in their swimming pool. And when their solar power gets 100% and they have 3 or 4 days of sunlight on, they turn them on and they heat their pool that way, because that sucks down all this most efficient way to suck all the power they could and make it and heat their pool. You do things because the biggest argument I've ever had to this is that some people say, well, what's the payback for your solar? And my question to them is, well, what's the payback for your car? It would be cheaper if you just got an Uber to go back and forth to work every day. You wouldn't have to pay for insurance, you wouldn't have to pay for gas, you wouldn't have to pay for maintenance, you wouldn't have to pay for tires, you wouldn't have to pay for this. But it would be one hell of an inconvenience. So you don't do it. Same thing's true for solar with me. I could maybe in some cases it would be cheaper to not have a solar system. But it's a heck of an inconvenience when there's a storm to not have electricity. It's a heck of an inconvenience to pay an electric bill that keeps going up every month because the power company. It's a heck of an inconvenience this week to be in Nevada and know that my electric bill is going up $20 a month next month and I'm doing nothing to cause it and there's no way to stop it. Those are the type of things that they drive me crazy. It's not always about saving money. All right, rant over temporarily. Next question is, what is the simplest dashboard card setup for monitoring solar production? So that's a great question. Let me just go through and just set something up for you, because that's a great demonstration that we haven't done any real demonstrations yet of that type of nature. So let me just show you how easy it is in Solar Assistant to set something up. We'll just go in here and we're gonna go, I got a test page here which stinks, so I'm not gonna use that. Let's just go to overview. That one stinks too. Let's go to battery review. There we go. All right, so we are going to come over here to the EG4 page because it's got nothing else on it. It's a pretty simple page. And we're gonna just, and you know what, we could probably just add. So we're just gonna add an item to this. And so we go in here and we say, I'm going to go to this area here. I'm going to add an item. And I want to go in and I want to add a light wall switch. Now the question was specifically around, what was the question around? What is the simplest dashboard card setup for monitoring solar production? Monitoring solar production. Okay, so let's do monitoring solar production. So I need a meter. Now they have a power card that I could just add a power card, but I think this is kind of cheating because it really is doing what he asked, but how is he going to know that there would be a predefined function to allow that to happen? So what I want to do is I want to find an entity and I want to find total PV amps, energy, power. Now, power, as you know, is the number of wattage you're using at that instance in time. Energy is the amount of used electricity over a period of time. So you can store an amount of energy in a battery, and then you can pull it out a little power at a time until you run out. And if you put in a certain amount, then you get to take out a certain amount. So we're going to look first, and we're going to add power. So power looks like this. And this is, right now we're generating 570 watts of power, total PV power. Now remember earlier, this is a variable that I created that basically says, show me all of the power sources for PV added together. So all I have to do is say, yep, that's the one I want. I want to say, show me the power and show me the energy, and click add. And it's going to give me two simple formats here to show me those two items, and I can add that to the dashboard. Now, it's as simple as that. They're there, they're on the dashboard. Now, what most people want, though, is they don't want to see it in a format like this. They want to see this in a format that looks a little bit more like a chart or a graph or something along those lines, or even like this guy here. This is more of a gauge card. So what we could do here is we could go in here, we could say, okay, what kind of card do we want? Well, we want a gauge, G-A-U-G-E. So we're going to take the gauge card, and then we're going to say, well, what gauge do we want to, what did we want to gauge? Well, we want it total PV, what am I doing here? Total PV power. And as you can see here, now it's showing the same thing, but it's showing it in a gauge. But what we haven't set or configured here is what's the maximum and the minimum and all of that kind of cool stuff. So let's give it a name first. And we're going to say, we're going to call it total power. Because total PV power, or we could just say total PV power, may even be better because it's not really total power, it's total PV power. And the units is what? It's watts, so it had that part right. But we could overwrite that and say, it's K or it's XMR or whatever you want to call it. But in this case, it was watts, and because it took the default of the actual field itself and used it. So we're going to leave it as watts. We're going to go in here and say, well, the minimum is 0. Now, if this was a battery, it may have negative, meaning there's power coming out of the battery, or positive, meaning there's power going into the battery. But in this case, there is no negative, it's just positive. So we can say 0 is the minimum. And we know that the maximum amount of panels that we have connected is there's 3,700 watts of power on the RV roof and another couple thousand in the solar shed. So at most, this shouldn't be more than, let's say, 5,000 watts. Technically, could it be higher? Sure, in the perfect environment. But all that's going to do is just show it at, full peak. Okay, so now we say save on this and we get this little chart here. But now we're looking up here and we're saying, well, if it's really low, it should really be red because we're not generating enough. And if it's really a little higher, but not as high as we want, we can make it yellow. And if we want it green, if it's got, over 1,500 watts of power. So we need to modify this and give it a little bit more definition. So we're going to define in a needle gauge. Do we want the needle to look like that, where it just shows the red, green, and blue like these over here? Or do we want it to show the colors based on how far it is up? And we can kind of answer that question later, but first we need to define what are the three colors. So green is over 1,500, and yellow, we're going to say, starts at 500, and anything under 500 is going to be red. Now we can say save to this, and now if that goes over 500, it's going to turn to the yellow. Well, you see it just did that, turned yellow, went over 500. But if it was over 1,500, then it would turn green. So you would be able to look at the screen and just see, hey, that's green, everything's cool. Now, if you wanted it to show like this and you wanted to see where in the chart it was, then that's really easy also. You can come in here and just say, show it to me like this. And now you can see that we're at the top of the red, at the bottom of the yellow, but we're not anywhere near green. But it doesn't have the same meaning as looking at it and saying, oh my God, there's a problem. Because if I look at it and it's red, it should mean, hey, there's a problem. So that's the easiest way to build a gauge. Now, you could build the same gauge, and the nice thing about Solar Assistant is you can sit here and you can duplicate this, and you can say, okay, I want this on solar shed PV power. Whoops, that ain't gonna work. It's under Victron. And I don't remember the name, so I'm gonna have to scroll through here, through all this fields, and figure out what the name is. Victron PV power. So we know the PV power from the Victron system is all from the solar shed. So we'll put that in there. And we know that the maximum power coming from the shed that I've ever seen is around 1,500. So we'll put that in there. And we'll say anything over 300 is green, anything over 100 is yellow, and anything from 0 to 100 is and boom, you have a new one there with a completely different meaning from a completely different source. Now, in order to get to the 505, though, really we need to know the whole picture. So we don't only need the total. Well, it's not even got a description that's right. Let's fix that description. So if you make a mistake on the description, you just come here and say total. Wow, I can't type either. Total shed PV power. Okay. So now we need just the power from the RV in order to show us the total that would add up to 503, right? So we're going to duplicate it again. And this time we're going to go looking for I wonder if I can do it this way. Yeah, look at that. PV power. Now there's a PV power 1, a PV power 2, and a PV power. I just so happen to know that the Lux gives us 4 variations of PV power. PV power 1 and PV power 2 are the two things. The third one is a bus internal to it, and the PV power is the two added together. So that's the one we want there. And then we could come in here and we can say 6,000 XP PV power. And it's watts. And the maximum we're going to get from this one is 3,700. And in green would be really anything over 2,000. And yellow would probably be anything over 1,000. Voila. Okay. Now, you could make a lot of sense out of this, and you could do a lot of different math, and you can see when one updates, the system triggers all these calculations. So when a new message comes in through that MQTT server that says, hey, the amount of power that the PV is putting out on the RV, and it sends that message to the MQTT server, and then the Home Assistant picks that message up and says, hey, the PV power changed. And then it goes through and changes all the calculations that it has and then sends out those updates on the screen. So you can see here, when the shed's PV power updates, the total updates. When the RV's power updates, the total updates. So you get the updates twice as often to the PV power anytime the other two change. But the key here is that all the numbers are all updated anytime there's a change to them. But you can see here that that's very, very simple to go in and create these charts. And it's very easy to say, well, you know, I want it to show me red when it's below the limit, and yellow when it's in the middle, and green when it's at the top. And it's very easy to go in here and just switch this to that type of a chart for all three of these in a matter of a few seconds and say, okay, look, what's underperforming and what's overperforming? Well, the solar shed's performing okay based on the configuration we gave it. It's yellow, but the 6000 XP is underperforming. Now, you could go in and tune these and play with them, and I just basically made up numbers as we were going along. But as you can see here, all of these come to perspective of what you want. For example, the battery 1, I've got this one figured exactly the same way. Red is 0%, yellow is 30%, green is 50%. So anything over 50%, I'm like, hey, this is good. Anything over 30%, I'm like, yeah, you know, it's getting there, it's getting low. And anything under 30%, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, now we're starting to get into a, you know, to the area. If I'm going to bed and it's sitting down at 25%, then I know I've got an issue. I got to deal with some kind of charging, or I could let it deal with it automatically on its own, because you can also configure all of that. So hopefully that answers the question and gives you a good example of how you can configure different things, how you can use formulas, and you can go in and you can create. Now, once this is done, you hit done, and that becomes part of your chart that's out here, and you don't ever have to rebuild that. You just come back to this page and voila, they're there. Now, the nice thing is about Solar Assistant, this version, is they've made this where you can drag things around now. You can move them around. There's a little bit of drag and WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, kind of editing and stuff like that. There used to be a lot more configuration and YAML files and stuff like that, but as you can see, most of that's gone now. Now you can go in and you can just basically pick and poke the things that you want. If you wanted to add things together, you can do that within there. You can build formulas in it and all that kind of stuff. I found that a lot of that is more easily done through their and you're gonna have to forgive me here for a second. I'm gonna have to go hunt down where this actually happens. I think it's over here under helpers. Yeah, here it is. So under helpers, you can configure how to you can turn off and on switches. Like here, I got a Boolean switch of whether the alarm is enabled. In other words, do I want to be notified when the door opens at the RV? And so I can turn that off or on. And then I can use that switch within triggers that says, hey, if the door opens and the alarm is turned on, then send me a message saying, hey, the RV door just opened. And that way, if I'm not home, I may not have an alarm at the house unless I've got a device hooked up to the Home Assistant to set an alarm off. But at least then I would be notified on my phone. I could log in through a camera and I could take a look at it. Not to mention that Home Assistant also can do complete cameras, history reviews, security cameras, people detection, AI detection, voice, like Alexa type stuff where you talk to her and tell her to do things and all that. It can do all of that also. So that's kind of, should answer that question and show you how to set up and monitor how the solar production is done and how you can monitor it. That was the easiest way, is just dump one of those gauges on there, set the high point, the low point, the medium point, change the colors, and boom, you're done. And that would be as easy as it got. That would happen once you connected the Solar Assistant to it. Automatically, you could just go in and say, use these values. You don't have to have the calculated values like I have. to add all of those different systems together. Okay. Next question is, can I automate things like turning off non-essential loads and battery drops too low? Absolutely. You can turn off and on things and all kinds of crazy rules and stuff like that. Matter of fact, sometimes your rules can get so complex that you have problems debugging when they're supposed to be on and when they're supposed to be off. I had some problems like that with my fan in my bay at one time. The fan kept coming on and I couldn't figure out what was triggering it. The nice thing is there's a lot of debug information about it. It makes it really easy to find mistakes like that. So you come over here into Home Assistant and you go into those triggers like this one here. Let's see if we can find one here. I need a trigger. Automation. Bay fans on at 90 degrees. It says it triggered 8 hours ago. So you can come in here and you can say, show me the traces, and it tells you when it ran, what decisions it made based on that, what the answers were, what did it end up doing or not doing, what signals did it send to what devices based on your rules. And you can kind of see all of the information you need to understand why this rule of if the bay temperature changes, then if the bay humidity is below 80%, then turn on the bay fans, and you can go and analyze all the different reasons for why that happened and see that with all the rules that are there. So the answer, short answer to that one is yes. The long answer is that 20-minute speech I just gave you. All right. How do we keep dashboards clean when there is so much data? You don't. You basically go in and you build some dashboards, and then they age and what you want changes, and you create a new dashboard and you copy over pieces that you want, and then it changes again, and you build another one, and you delete things and you migrate them, and nothing. That is the cool part about Home Assistant. It's not like Solar Assistant where what you get is what you get and nothing changes ever. You go in, and as what your needs determine, you determine what you want to do. One of the projects I'm looking really forward to doing here over the next couple of months is a friend of mine has asked me to come help him do an energy audit. We're going to hook up a really cool monitoring system to all of his circuits and everything, and then we're going to monitor it all, and I'm going to put it on a Home Assistant so we can track it and so I can show you guys what's going on. But at first, our needs are going to be, what is every device using, and what is it doing, and exactly specifically how much energy is it using, and does he know that, and would he prefer to replace the equipment or be more efficient, or would he need to learn to deal with that energy power, and how much power does he need to fuel it? Simple things that people don't understand of, oh, I've got a TV and I watch it for 3 hours a night, and how much is that costing me? And they don't realize their hot water heater uses more in one day than the TV uses in a month. You know, it's simple things like that people don't understand. So my question is, well, okay, if you're not home, you know, for a week at a time, what would happen if you shut the hot water heater off when you weren't home? You know, how much power would you save? And there's no way to really know other than to know how much it uses and take that out of the calculations, or actually do it and see what the response is from your system. And that's what Home Assistant does. Keeping your dashboards clean, never going to happen. You got to go in and do maintenance on them, delete things as you don't like them, add new things as you do want them. I started with my basic dashboard, and I have created 8 or 10 or 12 of them. And as a matter of fact, there's probably another 8 or 10 that I've just deleted or moved to, quote, testing, because they're no longer needed. And then I copy elements of them when I know there's something in them that I might want again in the future. A certain gauge or a way, some complicated formula that I built or something. I put them off to the side so that I can use them later. Is there a template or layout, starter layout that I can use for Solar Dashboard and Home Assistant? The answer is yes and no. Is there a simple layout? So some of the things that come with Home Assistant are built to do exactly what you're asking. So if we go into Home Assistant and we go over here to this power, where is it? Energy dashboard. So this energy dashboard gives you all kinds of information based on what usage you have, So I can go into, let's say today, and it tells me what the day's usage is, breaks it down by electric usage, about power usage. If I've hooked up different wall plugs and monitoring devices, I can link it into this. And you basically just configure this through this energy configuration board here and say, okay, here's my grid supplies, here's my solar panels, here's my battery storage, here's my, if you have gas meters like in my RV, I'd like to get a meter to measure how much propane tank I've got left. If you're living off grid out in the woods, that would be extremely useful. They've got water tank detectors where you can determine how much water's left in your water supply, so that you can determine if you want to run your water pumps to run your well pumps to fill in your water. Water consumption, of how much water you're using. There's all these devices you would configure in this screen, and then in turn, it builds you this cool little set of charts here that has, how much solar you collected each day, and what came from the shed as opposed to what came from the RV, and how much you used in battery discharge, and how much went into the battery, and all of that. Because what you're normally going to see is here we've got a 2.79 kilowatt hours of battery usage for the day. But what we don't realize is that 11.6 kilowatts of that happened before the sun came up, and 8.8 was put back in after the sun came up. So there's a 2.7 kilowatt difference. But just looking at battery levels, you wouldn't know how much of that in and out took place. So this allows you to get to that in and out. And then I brought in 4 kilowatts from the grid, meaning that, there's a net change of so and so and so and so. But this is the default one. And so, yeah, there is some basics templates that start you off there. And the templates for the gauges and the templates for the graphs, and like all the graphs that I have here on my master status screen of this is nothing more than a little saying, hey, I want this chart, and here's the elements I want you to put on this chart. Like, for example, this one here is the Cook's station temperature. So there's a weather station that's called Cook's nearby. And it has the weather temperature from there. It has the temperature in the bay, because I have a temperature gauge in the bay. I have one in the living room. I have one in the bedroom. And I have one in the inverter itself. And so this allows me to see what the temperature is everywhere all the time in one chart, and see, okay, look at, when we go to bed here at, in the evening, you can see the temperature in the bedroom drops considerably so that we can sleep. And then in the morning, that's during the day. What is that? Bedroom temperature. So that means the air conditioner in the bedroom was turned on at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it hasn't been turned off, and it's still running, and it's still in there, and it's still running, and it's 74 degrees in there, which probably means my wife is laying in there and watching TV or Facebook or something. But this is the kind of, all this is all there. You just have to tell it what the source of the information is, and it builds a lot of it for you. When you start getting, most of it comes in as little triggers and gauges like this, and that's where you start building gauges and meters and things like that. But a lot of the basic details that you need are already there. Okay. How does the setup work for an RV compared to a home system? The biggest difference is that on a home system, you're going to need to have some Bluetooth extenders, and probably hook up some Bluetooth mesh and stuff like that, because a lot of your devices are connecting through Bluetooth, or they're connecting through your internet. And if they can't get to the internet, or the Bluetooth is too far away, then you're going to need to set up relays and stuff like that. A lot of that stuff is very easily. All the devices are sold. You take them out of the package. As a matter of fact, I even saw one back of 3 or 4 months ago. The mailman delivered one, and somehow the device was activated inside the package. The little pull tab had come off, and as soon as he set it down outside, it was close enough. My Home Assistant said, "Hey, I detect there's a new device out here." And every time you log into Home Assistant, this little settings page has a little number count on there of devices that either need to be upgraded, and asking you if it's okay to upgrade them, or new devices that it's detected that it wants to know, do you want me to add this? And I had some temperature gauges that came in, and it said, hey, there's a new temperature gauge sitting around. Do you want to add this? I've also had my neighbor hook up a home assistant compliant weather station that, where they could tell what the weather is in their living room and what the weather is on the front porch. And it asked me if I wanted to add it. And so those kind of, actually politely say, no, please don't add this, because I don't want to take over my neighbor's thermometer or thermostat. But does the setup work with RV compared to home? Yeah, it's not a whole lot different. The only big difference is that in a home, it's a bigger environment. You have to deal with the bigger environment. You may have to extend your Wi-Fi into certain areas so that you get access to things. If you're using Bluetooth devices, you may want to extend them. If you're using Zigbee devices, you may need to extend them. Home Assistant allows for, I use a Bluetooth extender down in the bay to make sure the signal there is just as strong as on the other end of the RV, and I put them across the RV in two different places to kind of balance that out. Is that something you have to do? Probably not in the RV. But it does make for a lot stronger and even signal. So that's going to really be the main piece, is different connection points and different things. Also in an RV, if you're moving around, you got to deal with the Wi-Fi issue, unless you're not going to turn on Wi-Fi at all. But I have Starlink, so mine is always on, but it's the first thing I connect when I get someplace, and it's the last thing I disconnect when I leave. So there is that gray zone when I'm not there, but I can't control things. In a home, obviously your Wi-Fi would be always on. Your network, you could set up on much stronger relay stations, and they could be wired, and everything could be there. You do a lot more Wi-Fi and wireless when you're in an RV, because you don't want to run wires through everything. And you're getting down to the end here. Anna B. from Arizona asks, can I get alerts on my phone if the solar batteries get too low? Yes, you absolutely can. You can get alerts on your phone. You can get alerts on your iPad. You can get alerts on your computer. You can have them email you. You can basically have your home assistant talk to you like Alexa does and give you a voice warning saying, hey, there's somebody at the front door, or your batteries are getting low, or whatever you want. All of that is perfectly legitimate. Basically, if you've seen it happen on any other home automation, you can do it with Home Assistant. And usually with multiple devices, and you get to pick and choose which ones, as opposed to just using the one that's branded to come with that system. What was the most practical automation you use in your own setup? The most practical one that I use is my lights coming on, my porch lights coming on at sunset, and them going off automatically when I know that I'm already in bed. That automation runs every day. Originally, I had it set up when I'm home to do it this way, and when I'm not home to not do it. But you know what? It works so well that now I've just turned it on to just do it all the time. I also like the automation that tells me when I left the refrigerator open, and when it tells me that the front door is left open. It's nice to have the alarm version that comes off and says, hey, somebody's entering your RV. That's a cool one, but one I like the most is, and anyone who's ridden in an RV for any length of time knows that it's really easy to leave the door cracked on accident. And so you get that sensor set up just right, and you leave that door open, and it tells me, at 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes, hey, your RV door has been open for 3 minutes. Is this really what you wanted to do? And most of the time the answer is no, and I get to go up and close it. Because you've also got to, in an RV, your air conditioning is a bit different. Leaving the door open to your RV is like leaving the door open to your refrigerator. 2 minutes later, you have no refrigerator. You have a room temperature unit that has cold stuff in it. And the same thing's true with an RV. You leave your front door in your RV open, and 2 minutes later, you don't have an air-conditioned RV. You have an RV with an air conditioner that runs 24/7 and never gets cool. Can I use the system to track how much power my fridge or AC is using? Absolutely, positively you can, and I do all the time. As you can see here from this report, I built a whole power usage board here. And this board is a fraction of what I'm going to do in a future video when I help my friend do a power audit in his. I'm going to do every circuit in his house and show you usage on every device and every item in there. But you can see here, this tracks usage for the hot water heater when it's on. It tracks the total usage for the day. It tracks my refrigerator. It tracks the island usage where my coffee pots are. I could even go down to plugging in certain devices for each one of them. Does it, let me see what that message says. I haven't seen that screen here in a few minutes. Give me just a second. Let me just find it real quick. And I think it's this button here. So the question is, does it work doing stuff with wearing a smartwatch? Yes, CJ, it absolutely does work with a smartwatch. The iPhone, it is very friendly to the iPad, the iPhone, and smartwatches and all that kind of stuff. So if your watch links into your Alexa or it links into any other home assistant type thing, and you've got those things configured, it does things from my Fitbit. It does things, and my Fitbit's just a little, not even a smartwatch, it's just a Fitbit. But it'll link into there and it'll tell me how many steps I've taken and all kinds of stuff. And you can have it send out messages and reminders and all kinds of stuff. So absolutely it does. Great question though. Let's see here. What am I doing? Oh, there I am. Okay. So the next question is, what is the biggest benefit that you've noticed day to day from running all these three things together? Being able to see everything in one place. I don't find myself saying I'm going to log into the EG4 app to see this, and then I'm going to log into Solar Assistant to see this, and then I'm going to log into this to see that. And then I got to log into the Victron device to see this, and then I got to go out to the shed and hook up a Bluetooth device to see how much is connected there. I log into Home Assistant, everything is in one place, and what isn't there, I can put it there. That's the biggest benefit that I've seen from it. Everything in one place and the control to make it look the way I want and work the way I want. How do I stop duplicate entries from showing up in Home Assistant? I'm not sure exactly what duplicate entries from showing up in Home Assistant really means. I'm assuming that you've got something that's showing up more than once, and that's probably on this screen here. Sometimes you get devices like this and they show up more than one time, like this. This is a distance measuring device that I have for a sensor, and it does have that defect, but that is the actual device that is causing that, not the Home Assistant. I've had it, once they get it corrected and the defect's done and you do the hardware upgrade, the duplicates will vanish. You can go in and delete them all, but my suggestion is just don't use them on any of reports, and don't worry about the test page where all that content is. Or I don't even think they call it a test page. I call it a test page where everything gets automatically added so that I don't have to go hunt it down, and when I need to know what something is, I can go back and find it there. So I'm assuming that's what the question was referring to. If not, let me know, Paul, and I'll follow up on it. Is Wi-Fi reliable enough for, there it is, I knew it was coming. Is Wi-Fi reliable enough for these integrations, or should I hardwire everything? Yes, no, maybe so. Let me give you more details on that. Wi-Fi works, but the wired versions is 1,000 times faster and more reliable. And let me tell you why I mean that. If you keep in mind that a message is coming in from every device constantly saying what the status is and everything it changes, constantly the amount of input from each of your panels is changing, constantly the amount of power your inverter is using, constantly the Victron device is sending updates for different sets of panels and different inverters and total calculated energy used and total this. And so that means there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages. And I think there's a log, and I can show you that. Let's see, is there a log? Yeah, logbook. So constantly these messages are coming in to your Solar Assistant. And if all of this is coming through Wi-Fi and all of this is being relayed from your inverter to your Solar Assistant, from your Solar Assistant to the MQQ server, from the MQQ server to your Home Assistant, and then there's changes that are written back to the MQQ server and it gets sent over to the Victron device, and the Victron device is sending it back to this. And if all of this is going through your Wi-Fi network, then it's slowing everything down. And not that there isn't enough bandwidth to do it all, but it gets sluggish because your response times are slower. So I've learned that yes, it works, But what Solar Assistant has a tendency to do is not process messages in priority when there's a pileup of them. In other words, if I get 5 messages from one device because it sends out an update every second, and I've only got time to process the last one, the other 4 just go away, and I only get an update once every 5 seconds as opposed to every second. So when you do this based on a network plugged in device, then you get all of these messages and everything updates a lot quicker than you would see. And you can see that one there change to 49.8 and change to that counter coming off of that Victron device there. All of these are changing constantly. And there are a lot more of them when the sun is out and you've got all kinds of different things going on and inverters running and hot water heaters running and all that. So all of these devices are all happening at the same time. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to want to, and my guess is on this screen you're also not seeing everything simply because it's scrolling past so fast that you're not going to see it all. But the answer is yes, you can do it on Wi-Fi, and it is fast enough if you've got a small enough system. But when you start getting into bigger systems, I do suggest you do wired. I have ran a wire from my my Home Assistant that's inside the RV down through the bays into the bay area where the solar system is connected, and I have a small hub down there that everything can just plug directly into to eliminate all of that traffic back and forth, and it made a considerable difference in speed of processing. Does it all get processed? Yes, it still gets all processed. Does it all get processed as timely? No. You don't skip messages to jump to the end result. When you go to process a message that says how many watts of the solar panel is putting out, it updates it as of right now. And if it gets an answer every second and it only has time to fill in the blank once every 5 seconds, that means 4 of those answers never went out, never got updated. So you see it jump from 100 watts to 105 watts, not 100 watts, 101 watts, 102 watts, 103 watts, 104 watts, 105 watts. So you don't see all of those updates. Not that it isn't accurate, it only shows you the latest results. All right, next, we are getting very close to the end here. There's only 35 questions, so I'm at 33, and then we are done for the evening. So if you have hello, Dan. Don't know how long ago I missed your message, but I do see it. And hello to you. The chat has been extremely slow tonight, so welcome. All right. Getting on to message number, what is the biggest mistake people make? What is the biggest mistake people make when setting up the MQTT? They don't understand the client-server representation of MQTT broker. The broker is the server. It is the master of all the messages. They all come into it, and then it sends them out to each of the people who want to receive those messages. The problem is in MQTT, when you start getting into Home Assistant, Solar Assistant, and the Venus system, they all have their own broker. And the trouble is figuring out how to get them all onto the same server so that they can all read and communicate with the same data. And that's the problem, is that messaging and shuffling of messages back and forth. That's the one I will make you a video over and answer that in a lot more detail. But not understanding the basic concept of client and server and a messaging server is really the biggest problem there. What is the easiest way to troubleshoot the Home Assistant? Is it receiving data from Solar Assistant? This is a really good question, but the easiest way is to start at the beginning. There is a client that you can connect to the Solar Assistant's server. So if you go into Solar Assistant and you scroll down here under configuration, and you scroll all the way down here to the bottom, and the MQQ broker is turned on, and it tells you what the port is, and it shows you that it's enabled, and it probably allows you to configure a password and everything in there. Go connect to that server and make sure that it's actually getting the messages that you need. Then, if that is the case, then take it and connect to the Home Assistant's server, and the Home Assistant's broker should have a configuration that takes the messages off of the Solar Assistant's broker and puts them into the Home Assistant's broker and synchronizes those two together. And so if you're receiving the messages here, the nice thing is that Home Assistant, once it sees them, it has an auto configure mode and it'll populate all those fields for you and everything. But that would be where I would start. Is start by making sure that Solar Assistant is generating the messages in that server, and then make sure that the Home Assistant broker is actually configured to receive those messages and duplicate it in its broker, because it's the only broker that Home Assistant talks to is its own broker. It does not go out and talk to the Solar Assistant's broker. You have to configure that within it to say, hey, there's another server over here, go get those messages, bring them over here, take these messages and put them over there, so that you have bi-directional communication. All right. Where am I? And here we are. Last question in the pile. Olivia from Georgia asked, do firmware updates on Victron Deer ever break integrations? You know, it's a good question, and I haven't had it do it yet. They've been very reliable, and I just blink it, go in, and when I log in and it says there's an upgrade, I tell it to do it. Now, I do that a lot and get broken things all the time. And my idea is to deal with one broken item today or 10 broken items tomorrow. And I always prefer to deal with the one now. But I don't have a lot of complex Victron devices all connected that would cause me a massive problem if it did break. So what I mean by that is I don't have charge controllers that are being controlled by what batteries report or by how much solar is coming in that is using the Servo GX in that way at this point. As my systems grow in complexity, maybe having more communications between all those devices for Victron will cause that. Up to this point, I've been outside of that environment or that ecosphere of the Victron sphere, and more in the EG4 and the generic RS485 and the CAN bus communications and the home automation and all that kind of stuff. So no, not today. I haven't had that problem. Victron's been very reliable in doing their upgrades, and I hope that some Victron people out there that do this, tell me in the comments if you've had that problem, because I haven't seen it. And if you don't have that problem, I'd love to hear that too. I'd love to hear that my experience isn't unique and that Victron is just that good. But I don't know that at this point. I don't have enough exposure to it to answer that question. All right. That is all of the questions and all of the content. I'm going to put the, I'm going to put the QR code back up on the screen. This QR code contains a bunch of different links and everything from the show today. And I'm also going to go in and get you a couple of other additional things that I wrote down earlier about a playlist for the RV setup that I have, and a Shelly, how to connect the Shelly devices and stuff to your RV or to your outlets and wall plugs and light switches and meters and stuff at your house. I'm pretty sure I have a video on that also. And if I don't, I should have one, and I'll make one. But I'll go ahead and get those configured. And but it has everything that you need. I would love to hear your comments on what aspects of this I didn't cover that you really wanted to see. I struggled to do this show for 3 or 4 weeks in a row simply because I couldn't figure out a variation of it I could do well in a live stream, knowing that I had to flash Raspberry Pis and set up configuration servers. I had to be local network because of firewall issues to configure and log in as root here and do this and do that there. So it provided me with a lot of complexities that I just haven't been able to overcome, short of bringing either everything here into the studio or having the remote and having the live stream sitting in the middle of rainy season in Florida, which is probably a bad idea too. So let me know which aspects of this you feel are missing, and I will build videos around that aspect of it, because I think this is the way of the future. And as state of charge becomes more and more closed loop, open loop, become less and less of an issue, and the standardization becomes out more and more, that more of this is going to happen and more of this is going to be used in the future. I am really looking forward to doing that audit on that friend's house and setting it all up completely and hooking up Solar Assistant and giving you guys, and maybe that's the opportunity for me to build a system from scratch and show you all the steps in the process, from hooking up the Solar Assistant and hooking up the Home Assistant and connecting them all together in a fixed environment that's a little bit more controlled. Hope you guys all have a wonderful week. Don't forget that the solar credit ends on December 31st. The way the tax laws appear to be written, and I am not an accountant, but I'll tell you my interpretation of them is, if the system's installed, you get the tax credit. So order those systems early, get them installed, and take the free money. That's what it's there for. Let's make it useful. And I hope this has answered some questions about Home Assistant, Solar Assistant, the Venus system, and anything that it hasn't answered. Please let me know. I'll take care of it later. Talk to you then, and thank you for coming, and thanks for watching, and thank you to all the subscribers and all of those that participated in today's chat. We appreciate it. And a special thank you to you, CJ. You're here every week, and I do recognize it. Thanks a lot. You guys have a great weekend.